Welcome to Mr. Nightbleed. Tonight, in 5 terrifying true cemetery horror stories, we step through the rusted gates of burial grounds where names are carved in stone, flowers wither overnight, and the earth itself remembers what we try to forget. These are chilling accounts of bells that toll without wind, whispers leaking from cracked mausoleums, and footsteps echoing across gravel paths when you know you are utterly alone. This is a new channel, and my goal this month is to reach 3,000 subscribers. Almost 90% of viewers watch and leave without subscribing. Don't be one of them. Subscribe now. Before we begin, share in the comments where you're watching from and what hour of the night it is for you. And if there is a cemetery in your town that unsettles you, type its name. Because once you step past the gates of these haunted resting grounds, not everything allows you to leave. Kill the lights. Silence the world. Take a slow breath, and let us begin. I don't care if anyone believes me, but I need to put this out there because my brakes still click every time I pass a certain stretch of Archer, like someone's tapping them gently from the back seat. I'm not a superstitious person. My job for the last few years has been driving late shifts, first as a delivery driver, now doing rideshare around Chicago. I know the South Side, the way the orange streetlights sit heavy on cracked asphalt, the way lake wind gets into your sleeves, even if you swear you zipped everything. I know which alleys the cats own, and which gas stations leave the pumps on after midnight. I also used to think local legends were just something to break up the hours. Bartender stories, late-night radio callers, the kind of thing you repeat to your sister because she wants to be creeped out. But I drove for a living, and I prided myself on knowing what was real. The thin coffee, the thin patience of tired cops, the thin line between a fair and a fight. That's what I knew, until last winter. My sister Mara is the kind of person who has a running list of weird Chicago spots in her notes app. She teaches at a charter school near Midway and blows off steam by dragging me to places like the old stone water tanks in Bridgeport or the Route 66 sign by Ogden. She still texts me if she hears sirens near where I am, and she keeps a tiny pepper spray in her coat like a rosary. And then there's Luis, who I call my neighbor even though he's 3 blocks over. He works at the 24-hour diner on 63rd in Harlem, the kind of place where the neon flickers and the hash browns are either perfect or a soggy mess, and you won't know until they land in front of you. He's the one who first brought up the ghost on Archer with a shrug, like you'd talk about traffic. You'll pass her sooner or later, he said, pouring coffee into a chipped mug. Everybody does if they're out late enough. I'd heard of Resurrection Mary, obviously, a girl in white walking near the cemetery, a hitchhiker who never makes it past the gates. It's the most recycled story in the city. Every cabbie has a version, every uncle has an uncle who once had a cousin who swore he saw her. It was almost wholesome in a morbid way. The ballroom, the dance, the crash. A ride home that wasn't really home. I figured I'd end up saying, yeah, I saw some lady in a shawl, and that would be the end of it. But things don't start with the big moment. They start with the tiny things that feel like nothing while they're happening. The first thing was the app pin. If you drive for the apps, you know the map interface like the back of your hand. Most nights I let the algorithm drag me. On a Thursday in late November, I was hovering near Garfield Ridge trying to avoid the airport surge. The wind had that grainy sound it gets when it laughs through dead leaves. My heater made the faint rattle it only makes below 32 degrees. The ping came through, a pickup on Archer eastbound near the big cemetery gates. The name on the request was just M. No rating, no photo, nothing. New profiles are common, but no rating and no photo is unusual, because the app pushes for at least one. I thumbed accept anyway. It was quiet, and the clock along the dash ticked louder when there's no one talking. On the way there, my radio, the factory one in a 10-year-old Toyota, started doing the soft fade it sometimes does when you pass under power lines. Except I wasn't under anything. Just that wide, flat stretch where the road curves and the cemetery rises like a black shoulder behind the iron fence. I could see my headlights touch the bars and come back like dull teeth. A bus lumbered past the other direction, empty enough that the driver looked surprised to see another human. I pulled to the curb right across from the main entrance. There was nobody on the sidewalk. No one in the little pull-off. The cemetery gate stood shut, ironwork spearing upward. A plastic grocery bag flapped on a low branch, ghost white in the headlights. The app said, "You have arrived," and started its second-by-second countdown. I waited, hand on the emergency flashers. The car's fan clicked down to low because I'd switched it absent-mindedly. The countdown hit 1 minute, then 30 seconds. Then it canceled on me. No charge, no message. No rider is no longer in need of a trip. The pin would not vanish, though. It hovered on the screen like it had sunk into the map layer. I closed the app and reopened it. The pin was gone. When I looked up, a woman was standing by the gate on the inside of the fence. She had one hand on the bar like she was either resting or asking. She might have been 25 or she might have been older. Distances at night play tricks. White coat, dark hair. Nothing dramatic. She wasn't looking at me. After the day's worth of coffee in my system, every decision hits fast. Honk. Roll the window down. Ask if she's okay. Don't, I said out loud to no one. I put the car in drive and left. At the diner, Louis spun a straw between his fingers when I told him. They do that, he said. The pin thing. Puts you there even if nobody's there. He smirked like he'd meant to say something funny but believed it anyway. Did she wave? He asked. She didn't even look at me. They don't always wave. Who is they? I asked. He topped off my coffee without looking. Cops came in earlier, he added. Routine. They asked if we'd seen a girl walking toward Archer. What kind of girl? I asked. The kind that walks into traffic, the older one said. It sounded like he'd tell the same joke if it were the 4th time or the 40th. He slid me a slice of pie that he didn't charge me for, the cinnamon steam fogging up the window. The diner door chimed. A couple in socks hoodies came in and sat, eyes bleary. The world kept turning its small gears. I didn't pass the cemetery again for a week. My roots kept me deep in the city. When I did, it wasn't because I wanted to. I was taking a woman named Lynn to her night shift at a warehouse in Summit. She dozed off with the warehouse address clutched on her phone screen like a charm. The night was one of those dry nights that looks colder than it is. The moon was a closed eye. We had the quiet that happens between strangers at 2 a.m. Not awkward exactly. Just two people agreeing not to ask questions. When we got close to Archer, she woke up and said, "Take the longer way." Her voice had the edge of someone who'd thought about it beforehand. "You sure?" "It'll be like 8 minutes more," I said. She nodded, then looked past me at the passenger mirror as if there were a third person in the car. "I don't like that road late," she said. We didn't talk the rest of the way. That was the second thing. The third thing was not mine. It was Mara's. She called me on a Sunday morning, the kind of morning you ignore the weather and pretend eggs and toast will fix anything. "Okay," she said, not saying hello. "Don't freak out." What a way to start a conversation. "I had a dream," she said. "You know I don't do dream stories. But I had a dream I was in your car in the back seat and we were on Archer. And I was trying to say your name, but it kept coming out cold. Like when you try to shout underwater." She exhaled a laugh, but it was hollow. "Your heater was on full blast," she added. "And I was shivering." She got quiet. "I woke up and I could see my breath," she whispered. The window was cracked open. I don't do that in November. You know I don't. It was cracked just a little, like someone was trying not to let the smoke out. "Mara," I said, "you live in a building with trash chute drafts and radiators from 1960. It's not ghosts. It's city maintenance." She didn't argue. "Wisha," she said finally. "Yeah, okay. Are you working late tonight?" "Probably." "Don't text and drive," she said and hung up. I told myself it was life-stacking coincidences. Pins glitch. People ask to avoid weird roads. Dreams freak you out because they sound like a story. I told myself. And then I took a fare. It was a Monday night, snow threatening without committing to it. The air felt heavy and too clean. The ping said Archer Avenue. The name on the request said Maria, which could be a dozen names spelled that way. 5-star rating, which eased my shoulders. The pickup spot was a couple of blocks before the cemetery, near a corner where a streetlight had died and a dead-blown leaf was doing lazy circles by my tire. I put on the hazards and checked the mirrors, no one. The app said Maria is approaching. I've always hated that phrasing, like the voice knows something you don't. A figure came out of the shadow of a bare maple, moving careful, like she was testing the ground with each step. She had on a white knee-length coat that looked like it was either expensive or just kept very clean. No hat. I felt the urge to hold out my hand like you would for an older lady crossing a weird curb, and then checked myself because I don't touch passengers. She opened the back door and slid in. Everything in me paid attention at once. The way cold soaked forward from the rear bench, the papery sound of her coat, the smell of air that has never seen a furnace. She avoided my eyes in the rear view in a way that felt deliberate but not rude. "Where to?" I asked. She said, "Back to the gates, please," in a voice that made the word please land heavier than the rest. "The cemetery?" I asked, double-checking to sound normal. "Yes," she said. Her voice had an accent I couldn't place. Not European exactly, not local. I felt my mouth shape the next sentence before I asked it. "You know they're closed at night, right?" "I know," she said, as if it were a courtesy I had extended that she accepted. I eased away from the curb. The entire car felt like the temperature had been turned down a few degrees even though my heater stayed steady. I wanted to say something stupid like, "Big night?" even though it was just Monday. Instead, we drove in a quiet that felt fragile. I could honestly hear, the small plastic latch in my glove box buzzing against itself. At the first red light, she spoke, so softly that I only heard because there was nothing else to cover it. "He said he would wait," she said. I didn't know if that meant tonight or some other night or a night that never ended. "I'm sure he will," I said, because that's what you say. At the last block, she shifted forward. I saw her in the mirror then, really saw her. Regular face, dark hair. Not glowing, not dramatic. If you'd seen her in a grocery store, you'd think she was there for starch and milk. "You can drop me anywhere near the entrance," she said. I pulled to the worn spot where tires have shaped the curb. The iron gates were closed and the little office building beyond was dark except for a small nightlight amber in a window. A light breeze made a noise in the fence like someone running a finger along a comb. I put the car in park and turned to gesture to my Venmo sign. Habit more than hustle. "Do you—" I started. She wasn't talking anymore.
She had her hand on the door handle.
For a second, the kind of second that stretches, you let your eyes do the work a camera does, counting details. The hem of her coat was damp as if she'd walked near slush. Her hand on the handle was pale, sure, but there was a gray to it like the color had bled out of a photograph. My breath fogged the rearview mirror glass and then cleared. "Do you want me to wait?" I asked because it felt like an act of kindness and also a way to keep her from ending this moment and starting whatever the next was. She looked at me then, just quick, with that flicker of someone deciding whether to tell you something that would put weight on your shoulders. "You don't have to," she said. Then she opened the door and stepped out. The car's overhead light came on, killing the night inside the car for a second. Cold rushed in. She shut the door and it was just me and the hum of my tires and my heart hitting the ribs the way it does when a cop gets behind you. I watched her in the passenger side mirror. She stepped up to the gate and put her hand around a bar like she was about to shake it, but didn't. She stood, and for a moment I saw the angle of her face and it matched the angle I had seen the week before when I'd glanced up. And there was that shape at the fence. I messed with the radio to give my hand something to do. It landed on a station playing a song that sounded like it was coming from down a hallway. In the mirror, a flicker. No, I need to be careful here. It didn't look like she vanished. It looked like a car passed in the opposing lane and its headlights skated over the gate like a wave. And in that wash of light, I didn't see her. The wave went on, light then dark, and she wasn't there. I didn't drive. I just sat, listening to my own car the way you listen to a person who's about to say something important. The back seat felt damp and cold like someone had gotten in after walking in wet shoes. The seatbelt on the driver's side rear clicked back slowly, the way it does when it retracts after being twisted, except nobody had twisted it. I told myself mechanical things are weird in the cold. I told myself a lot of things. Then I looked down at the screen and saw the trip had never started. The app, which had said on trip, now showed my home screen with the little wheel spinning. There was no record. No rating to leave, no fare, no name. On the way home, I called Mara and let it ring until voicemail. "I took someone there," I said after the beep. I don't know why I didn't say her name. Maybe I was afraid of naming the wrong thing and inviting the right one. I don't know how to tell you about this without sounding like I'm doing a bid. I'll come by tomorrow. I'll bring those awful almond croissants you like. I hung up. I glanced at the back seat more times than was safe. Sleep didn't take me that night. When it did, it was like tripping. 1 second awake, the next deep under. I dreamed someone knocking on my window in a way too soft to be a threat, asking to be let in from the cold. Every knock had timing, like a heartbeat with a murmur. When my alarm went off at 9, I swore I heard the knock stop mid-tap. It's the sort of thing that makes you laugh at yourself just to get through brushing your teeth. I went to see Mara after her school day ended. She lives in a walk-up with stairs that tilt a little toward the west, like the building is done with the east. She opened the door before I knocked. "You look like you drove through a worry machine," she said. And then I told her. I told her about the pin, the woman, the cold, the gates. She listened like a teacher listens when a kid who never talks finally raises a hand. "Okay," she said finally. "We're going to do a drive." But during the day, we did. At 3 in the afternoon, sun weak and old, we went to Archer. The cemetery looked like an ordinary place for grief. Well-kept grass, flags stuck into snow, statues with faces softened by the seasons. The office was open, and a man with a tired mustache and the kind of jacket you buy at a farm supply store asked if he could help us. "We're just curious," Mara said before I could admit to anything. The man grunted like he had a script for this. "We get curious," he said. "We get kids. We get film students. We get guys looking to impress girls." He looked at me when he said the last one. "No filming without permission," he added to no one in particular. "You see anything at night and you call the police. Don't hop the fence." "We're not hopping anything," I said. He sat back on a stool and scratched something in a notebook with a stubby pencil. "There was a call last week," he said. "More to the pad than to us. Tipsy girl staggers up to the bars, tries to climb, cuts her hand, blood on the iron. We tell people the metal will bite in the cold. They do not listen," he put the pencil down. "People think cemeteries are where the weird starts," he said. "It's where it ends. The weird starts out there." He jerked his chin toward Archer. "People come here to finish their weird. On the way out, we paused by the gate. Mara took a picture of the ironwork because the spots where the sun hit made it look warm when it wasn't. "Do you want to tell Luis?" she asked. "He already knows," I said. "He'll tell me to bring him a plate from my mom's." She laughed. "He always says that," she said. "He thinks your mom is a restaurant." 2 nights later, a police cruiser idled in the spot I always pull into when I take a break. The older cop from the diner was in the driver's seat. He had the look of a man who had been outside for hours without enough coffee. The younger one stood near the gate talking to a woman with a dog. The dog pulled away from the fence in that way animals get. Like there's a smell you and I don't have the vocabulary for. I eased past and kept moving. On the radio, a DJ said something about a winter storm watch, and I pictured flakes sliding along the fence like little mints. I passed a bus stop and saw someone sitting on the bench in a white coat. I didn't slow down. I couldn't. My next fare was an older man named Stan, who needed a ride from the VFW to somewhere on 55th. He got in and filled the car with the smell of cold beer and aftershave that has no name. "You look like you saw a deer," he said, buckling up. "I didn't," I said. "You okay if I take Archer?" He laughed once without amusement. "Son, if I were you, I'd take Pulaski. But it's your car." He tilted his head to look at me. "My brother swore he took a girl to the gates once," he said. "Long time ago. She had a dress like a lampshade." He aimed a hand at his own lap in a shape that didn't really translate to any fashion I recognized. "He said she was quiet like a fish," he added. Wouldn't look at him. When they got to the fence, she said, "I left my wrap inside," and he said, "I'll wait." And when he looked back in the mirror, she was not in the car. He swore he smelled something like a burnt penny after. I told him he's full of it, but he never said it just once. He always said it like he was getting rid of it again. He tapped the dash. "We do what we can with our dead," he said. "Sometimes they do what they can with us." We took Pulaski. I stopped running night shifts for a week. I told Mara I had a cold. I told Luis I was doing day runs. I told myself a lot of things. My apartment felt too warm, like I had earned it, and I slept with the TV on at a low volume so the silence wouldn't have room to become shapes. At midday, I went to the grocery store like an old person. I watched the sky move slow over the city. It didn't help. It spread out the time like butter over too much toast. I found myself sitting in the car in the afternoon, radio off, thinking about the way the seatbelt had slithered back on its own. Thinking about her coat hem, wet but clean. Thinking about how she had said please like it meant something different. By the end of the week, it felt stupid. You can't be scared of a road. Roads are roads. The weather forecast said the storm had shifted north. I told myself I'd only do until midnight. If I got an Archer ping, I'd decline. The first hour was easy. 2 short trips to Bridgeview. One to a couple in their 20s who argued in soft voices about whether to order Thai or pizza. "Thai," I told them when they asked my opinion, and they laughed like it wasn't a real question. The kind of normal that heals you a little. It was close to 11 when the ping came. I read it the way you would read a letter that you wish wasn't yours. Archer Avenue. The name said M, and then my screen refreshed with a notification from the weather app. By the time the map came back, the name had updated to Mary. My finger hovered. The route glowed that soft blue that makes you feel like you're on rails. I did what you do with seatbelts and with danger. I clicked accept. You're not brave, I told myself, half joking. You're just tired. The pickup was the same spot as that first night because of course it was. The grocery bag was gone. A fast food cup had replaced it on its side against the curb, lid rolling in delicate circles. I put the car in park and turned on my four-ways. The road was emptier than felt fair for a big city. I could hear something high and thin, maybe a far siren, maybe the wind in something metal. The app told me she was approaching. I didn't watch the map. I watched the mirror. She came out of the dark like someone watched her stop and start, stopping her and then letting her go. White coat, dark hair, same as before and not. She opened the door and slid in without hesitation, as if she'd done it 100 times. The cold went through the car like a breath you suck in too quickly. Good evening, she said, as if we were about to attend something. Her voice was the same. The please in it, the accent on nothing. To the gates? I asked, as if the question mattered. Yes, she said. I put the car in gear. I can take a longer route to avoid traffic, I said, for no reason at all. No, she said. Go down, Archer. I did. The radio, which I had turned off, turned on. I don't mean that it sprang to life with a pop. I mean it simply changed its mind about being off. The volume ticked up one notch. The station, some AM signal that usually sells vitamins and panic, was playing dance music. Not the kind you and I hear at a club now. The kind that sounds like it's coming through a tube. Bright trumpet and brushed snare, fast and a little too cheerful. The streetlights blurred at the edges, maybe because my eyes were wet from the cold air in the car. We passed a shadow the size of a bus that turned out to be just a truck parked badly. The orange light slid by like beads on a string. I'm sorry if I frightened you before, she said. It was the first thing she'd said that sounded like she cared what I felt. I started, and then stopped, because anything I said would be the wrong size. I can wait at the gate if you want, I added. It felt like a reasonable offer. It also felt like I'd already offered and had that offer squandered. You don't have to, she said. He said he would wait. Who is he? I asked, not to trap her, just to put something in the air that wasn't the music. She didn't answer. We were 2 blocks out. The cemetery rose on the right, colder than the cold around it. The car rolled like it had its own mind. I tapped the brake because people run that light there, and I've seen 2 accidents in the last year. As I tapped, I felt the brake pedal move a little under my foot like someone else had their shoe next to mine and was matching my pressure. I snatched my foot up fast the way you do when you step on something that moves. The car didn't lurch. It smoothed. There's a family plot near the west gate, she said suddenly, too conversational. They planted a spruce. It never grew. I thought it was the soil. I think it didn't like being told where to go. We reached the gate. The iron bars had a light frost on them that looked like the beginning of hair. The office was dark. The little amber nightlight was on again. I pulled to my spot and shifted into park. Do you want me to walk you to the gate? I asked. It sounded idiotic coming out. I don't walk passengers anywhere. She shook her head. You don't have to, she said. The same words. She put her hand on the handle. The radio fluttered, the horn section stuttering like a record player with a bad needle. But she didn't open the door. Not right away. She leaned forward, head between the front seats. A careful angle like she was trying not to startle me. In the mirror, her face was so close I could see the fine pale hairs along her hairline. I could see where there was a sort of matte quality to her skin, like powder. I could see her lips and the little crack at the corner that comes from cold. You are kind, she said. You are careful. I could feel the breath of the words and I could not feel the breath both at once. She set something down in the little cup holder behind the center console. I felt rather than saw it. Wait, soft sound. For the wait, she added. Then she opened the door. Cold came in. Night came in. The overhead light washed the car. She stepped out and shut it. I kept my hands on the wheel like a kid at his driving test. She walked to the gate. She did not touch it this time. She stood with her head tilted like she was listening. A car passed going the other direction slow. It must have slowed because anyone would slow seeing someone standing by the cemetery gate at that hour. The driver's head turned a little curious. The light swung over the bars. She was there, and then in the motion of light there was just the outline of iron and a little eddy of moving air that flipped a dead leaf up and then let it go. I didn't get out. I looked down into the cup holder. There was a bus transfer ticket, paper gone soft with age. I could read part of a date, but not all of it. The ink had pooled in little blue islands. It felt damp and it felt dry. I looked up fast because my eyes wanted me to. My windshield had a faint print on the inside, the kind you leave when your hand is cold and you cup the glass to see out. 5 splayed shapes. Too long? No, not long. Just clear. I wiped at it and it stayed a ghost smear. Behind me, the seatbelt on the driver's side rear clicked back just a little, as if someone had taken their weight off it. I put the car in drive and rolled forward. I didn't look back. I didn't even when my brain said, "Look, it will be better if you look." The radio fell to static, then found talk radio telling me about salt trucks, then went quiet again. The heater made a tiny sound like a breath caught. At the diner, Luis didn't make any jokes when I walked in. He gave me water first without being asked. "You okay?" he said. I handed him the bus transfer. He pinched it between 2 fingers like it was fragile from a museum. "Where did you get that?" he asked. "Textbook," I said, because I didn't trust any other word. He looked up. "We used to keep a rumor jar," he said. "Put $1 in every time someone told a story about the girl. We could have remodeled the place on that money." He slid the ticket back to me. "You going to pin it to your visor like a talisman?" he asked, trying for light again. "No," I said. I put it in my wallet. It made the leather feel heavier. A couple nights after, I decided I would go back during the day and talk to the cemetery office again. Not because I wanted to chase it, but because I needed a structure to hang the feeling on. If I could put somebody's name on a paper and ask a simple question, "Do you keep a log of incidents?" Maybe it would take the pressure down. I brought coffee. I brought donuts. The mustache man wasn't there. A woman in a thick cardigan was, and she had the quiet competence of someone who can look up a plot number without blinking. I asked my question. She slid the donuts closer to her side of the desk and said, "We do, but the log is internal." She offered me a pen with the cemetery's name on it like a consolation prize. Before I left, she said, "You'd be shocked how many people lie down on graves at night and hope for a sign. They come in the day later and ask to be forgiven." The way she said it made it sound like a household chore. I said thank you and turned to go. "Oh," she added, "one more thing." She reached under the counter and produced a small brown envelope with a corner torn. "A groundskeeper found this last week by the west gate. We keep a lost and found because people leave all sorts of things. Phones, scarves, love notes. Do you know Amaya or Amara?" She showed me a piece of paper folded so many times it was almost square. At the top was a name, Mara. My sister's name is not unusual, but the handwriting was too similar to ignore. The rest of the note had been smudged by damp and time into a watercolor blur. "Probably nothing," the woman said. "We keep these for 90 days, then toss them." I took a breath that didn't get all the way in. "I know Amara," I said. The woman smiled in a way that said she liked being helpful. "Tell her she can pick it up. Bring a photo ID," she added, as if my sister would walk in claiming every note with her name on it. That night I drove only in broad lit streets. I took a man in a Santa suit from a nursing home holiday party to his bus on Harlem, and he asked if I had kids. "No," I said. "Best to borrow them from your siblings and give them back when they cry," he advised, beard askew. I laughed like a normal person. My phone had 2 messages from Mara, then a third right as I dropped him off. "Call me," the third said. I pulled into a Walgreens lot and called. She answered on the first ring. "Are you still working?" she asked, not wasting hello. "Kind of," I said. Did you write something at that cemetery?" She exhaled. "That is a sentence I didn't think I'd hear today," she said. "What are you talking about?" I told her about the note. She got quiet. "I haven't been there," she said. "I drove past last summer with Dad. We didn't stop." Then more quietly, "I did write something with my name at your place last month. My old grocery list on a sticky. I could not find it later. I figured I had thrown it out. You didn't pick it up for me as a bit?" "No," I said, stomach cold. "Do you want to go get it?" "Not tonight," she said. Tomorrow afternoon. I have a staff meeting until 3. A beat. Don't go there tonight, she added, with the same voice she used to use when we were kids, and she'd say, don't tell Mom after I did something dumb. I won't, I said, and meant it when I said it. I took one more ride just to prove the night didn't own me. It was a short hop to a woman named Lila, who worked at a grocery store. She talked about the price of eggs and laughed at herself for sounding like an old person. She tipped me in quarters because she said cash tips felt real. It was a relief. I turned the app off and headed home. On the way up Kedzie, my brakes clicked. Just once, a soft tick like the sound a fingernail makes when it taps glass. I pressed the pedal and it felt fine. I told myself I was hearing things. The next afternoon, Mara and I went back to the cemetery office. The cardigan woman was there. Oh, good, she said. We thought it might be you. She handed over the little brown envelope with ceremony. Mara unfolded the paper. It was the grocery list. We both stared. The top said Mara in her handwriting. The rest said milk, eggs, green onions, and then a smudge where something had been erased and rewritten. White dress. No. Dish soap. Mara had been trying to be efficient when she wrote the list at my kitchen table, circling white dish soap, because the store had a dozen kinds and she liked the cheap one. I think this is mine, she said, voice careful. The cardigan woman beamed. We try to get things back to people, she said. It makes the office feel useful. On the walk back, Mara said, I don't like this. It was not like her to say that without then saying how to fix it. We argued in a friendly way at my car. Maybe someone found it and thought it belonged to someone with the same name, I said. Maybe kids put it there. She shook her head. I didn't write white dress on that list even as a joke, she said. I don't wear dresses. The cold bit the insides of my nose. We got in the car and put the heat on full. Let's go get coffee, she said finally. We pulled out slowly. As we passed the gate, a shape moved to our right. A woman in a white coat standing near the bars. Not looking at us. Just there. Don't, Mara said before I could say it. I didn't slow. I hate that her coat is white, she added, shivering even with the heat up. I hate that it makes sense. What is she supposed to wear red? I dropped Mara at her place and went home. I put the bus transfer ticket on my kitchen table and looked at it for a long time. The date, the part that was visible, would line up with decades when bus transfers were still a thing like that. I could call the transit authority. I could ask a collector. I could do any number of rational things. I didn't. I put it under a magnet on my fridge and the magnet clicked like it was reluctant to hold it. The next few nights I chose loops that kept me away from Archer. It's funny though, how the city arranges itself. No matter how you plan, the map nudges you. An app glitch, a detour. On Friday, a car accident on 55th sent me down a side street where a kid had drawn a hopscotch court in chalk still bright from the last warm day. On Saturday, a pickup at a banquet hall I hadn't known was still open took me along Archer in the early evening when the sky was the color of a bruise. I told myself early evening didn't count. The road had other ideas. At a red light across from a pawn shop, my phone vibrated. It was a text, which the app almost never does anymore for pickups. The sender wasn't a number I recognized. The message said, can you wait? And no question mark. Just the period missing, like the breath ran out. I looked around reflexively. 3 cars behind me, 2 SUVs in the left lane, a bus far back with its sign saying not in service. The crosswalk sign changed to a hand. I typed, who is this? The 3 dots appeared. Then nothing. Then a second message. He said he would wait. I put the car in park with the light still red and turned my hazards on. I did the thing you aren't supposed to. I got out. The air hit my cheeks like a gloved hand. I stood there feeling like a streetlight was watching me. The wind did the comb-on fence sound again. A man outside the pawn shop looked over and then looked away in that practiced city way. The light turned green. Somebody honked, not mean, just reminding the universe that cause and effect still exists. I got back in, heart going too fast. The hazard lights clicked. It sounded like the brakes clicking. That night I told myself I didn't have to drive. I did my laundry. I texted Luis and asked if he'd ever stayed over. He sent back a string of laughing emojis and then, I live there. He sent a picture of the diner at 4 a.m, empty but for a guy in a security jacket drinking coffee with the haunted stare of a man who has counted bolts on a loading dock for 8 hours. I smiled even though I didn't feel like it. "I'll swing by," I wrote. "I saved you some of my mom's enchiladas." He responded in 1 second. "Bless you." On the way to the diner, I passed Archer because there's no escaping it if you live where I live. It was quiet, which doesn't mean empty. The sky spat moisture that wasn't rain. My wipers squeaked at intervals. As I neared the gate, my headlights caught something on the road. For a second, I thought it was a plastic bag again. It wasn't. It was a scarf, white, lying half on the curb, half on the asphalt, as though it had decided mid-fall to stop. I would have kept going, except a car in the oncoming lane flashed their brights once. It had that language, "Hey friend," so I stopped and put my flashers on and stepped out. The scarf was soft, the kind of acrylic that tries to feel like wool. When I picked it up, it left my fingers colder than the air. I held it like you hold anything, half believing it will bite. The gate was there, carved black into the night. I thought I could put it on the fence like you would on a beach rail. Somebody would find it, or it would hang there and collect frost like sugar. I didn't put it on the fence. I put it on the passenger seat, a stupid impulse because who would come back for it in my car? I got in and drove. The scarf slid a little, the way something does when a car turns. I resisted the urge to apologize to the empty air. At the diner, I put it on the back of a chair because it felt wrong to leave it where I could reach it. Luis took the foil-wrapped plate with a groan of thanks and nodded at the scarf. "You changing your look?" he asked. "Lost and found," I said. He shrugged. "Put it on the coat rack," he said. I didn't. I left it where it was, and it hung in my peripheral vision like a person who wanted to speak but had decided not to. 2 CPD officers came in to warm up. Not the older one and the younger one. New guys I hadn't seen around. They ordered coffee and burgers. Luis chatted because he knows everybody's everybody. "You guys still getting those woman on the road calls?" he asked. One of them, the one with the freckles, rolled his eyes with fatigue. "Once a week," he said. "Some guy jumps and swears he saw a bride. It's always a bride with these dudes. We go out, we see nothing, we write it up as a check welfare. The sergeant tells us not to make a game out of it. The rookies still do. They dare each other to get out of the car. The fence is sharp in the cold. Last winter, a guy cut his glove and acted like his hand was going to fall off. He slurped his soda like it was a punchline. The other one asked if the pie was apple. I didn't tell them about the woman in my back seat. I didn't tell them about the bus transfer. I didn't want to end up with my name in a story they told at roll call. Passed along for years, changed and polished until I didn't recognize myself in it. I ate a grilled cheese and watched the scarf by inches, like it might move if I gave it enough time. By the time I left, the sky had decided to snow. Fat, slow flakes that turn everything under a streetlight into a stage. I put my hand on the scarf. It was warm now. An ordinary warm, and that unnerved me more than if it had remained cold. I drove home along a route that should have kept me away from the cemetery, and I did okay until a detour sign nudged me toward Archer like a finger on the small of my back. "No," I said out loud and turned down a side street that the city had forgotten to plow. I fishtailed once and overcorrected, and then the car settled into a groaning glide. A couple shoveled their driveway in synchronized misery. They looked up, looked at me, and went back to the rhythm. The world was where it belonged for a second. In bed, the apartment warm around me like it had draped a heavy blanket. I put my phone on the nightstand. I woke at 3 because of a sound. It was a light knock on glass, a polite knock. Once, then a pause, then again the second a little more urgent, like whomever was out there worried you hadn't heard them. The knock came from my front window. I am not a hero. I do not open my blinds for strange knocks at 3 in the morning. I lay there with my heart trying to climb out. The knock came a third time, rhythmic like a teacher's desk knock when a mundane class needs her attention. I almost laughed at that thought, almost said Mara's name to the dark. The knocking stopped. The radiator clicked. Somewhere outside a plow passed and the scrape of its blade sounded like something metal being rolled across a floor. In the morning, I looked at the window. There was a handprint, faint, not enormous, not horror movie, just ordinary sized. The kind you get when you touch cold glass with a warmer hand and the condensation clings. I put my palm against it and it didn't match exactly. That meant nothing, I told myself. Our hands aren't the same day to day. There's swelling, there's heat. I wiped the window and it left a blur like a soft eraser. I looked at the passenger seat. The scarf lay where I'd left it. I brought it to my nose, expecting a smell. It smelled like nothing. That was somehow worse. I told myself to go to work. I did. The first writer was a nurse who had finished a 12-hour shift. With a smile, she had to take breaks from holding up. The second was a man who pretended to be on a phone call so he didn't have to talk to me, and I respected that. The third was a pickup near a church. The name on the request was simply M, no rating. No photo. I stared at it. The pickup dot wavered like someone was holding the phone and pacing. I could cancel. I could let someone else take it. I accepted. The address was not Archer. It was a street 2 blocks parallel, where the houses squat with their porches close to the sidewalk. I pulled up. A woman stood on the porch in a brown coat. Nothing white about her. She waved. Relief hit me so hard I almost smiled before I made sure it was safe. She got in and shivered dramatically, making me laugh. "Can you take me to my mom's?" she asked. "You don't have to wait." She gave me an address north of here, away from all of it. "Of course," I said, warmth rolling back into my bones. At the first light, she leaned forward. "You got the heat all the way up?" she asked. "Yes," I said, even as I nudged it higher. "You ever drive by that big cemetery on Archer?" she asked in a voice like gossip. My throat tightened like a string being pulled. "Sometimes," I said. "My uncle says he saw a ghost there once," she said, tone pure mocking, like she was daring me to join. "A lady in white," she giggled. "He was drunk." "He always is." I didn't answer. She kept talking. Her story had the edges of all the others. It felt like the city retold itself through her mouth. When I dropped her off, she left a peppermint candy wrapper in the cup holder. I picked it up to throw out and found the bus transfer under it, that same soft paper. I could swear I had left it on my fridge under a magnet. I could swear on it, but swearing does nothing, really. I put it back in my wallet. My heart beat harder than a piece of paper should make it. I didn't tell Mara about the knock. I didn't tell Luis about the scarf. Some things you keep because saying them makes them bigger. What I did do was start to say out loud when I was close to Archer, "I'm not taking rides there tonight." It was a habit, like buckling your belt. It's ridiculous, sure, but so is everything people do to make themselves feel safer. We talk to our cars. We knock wood. We avoid calling things by their names. A week passed, then 2, then 3. The city slid into deep winter. Snow piled on the curb like salt lines in a pot. The diner kept its door propped with a rubber wedge even when no one came in because the hinge stuck otherwise. The cemetery gates wore icicles like jewelry. I passed once or twice in daylight and nothing reached out. No arms, no breath. The fence was a fence. The office a square building where people did paper tasks and told each other about bad drivers. I exhaled. Maybe the city had turned its shoulder. Maybe whatever this was had decided I wasn't useful. Then a new thing. A notification on the app that I hadn't seen before. A thank your writer prompt. These happen when someone gives you a thumbs up. This one happened in the middle of a drive when no one was in my car. I tapped it. It showed me the last 3 thumbs ups. The names were normal, real people who had said good driver or clean car. A 4th name hovered under them, half loaded like a picture on bad Wi-Fi. Mary R. We know, it said, and kept the rest a secret. Then the screen blinked and the name vanished. Not replaced, just gone. The app returned to its normal blue calm. My hands started to sweat. The heater had not changed setting, but it felt suddenly as if a window was down. That night I decided to do one last pass, to drive from Harlem to Cicero on Archer and back, and then be done with it. Not to chase. To let it know I was finished. This is the logic of people bargaining with things they don't understand, showing up like a courtesy. The road was dry but salt-dusted. My windshield wore a lace of tiny white scratches from too many winters. I did the pass, nothing. I did the return. That's when I saw him. He was leaning against the fence, arms folded. Late 20s, maybe. He looked like he'd been standing for a long time. No hat, no gloves. No coat that seemed equal to the cold. He had the posture of someone waiting for his ride to pull up any second now. As if he'd be offended if I assumed he needed help. I slowed anyway because you do. I put my window down 2 inches. "You good?" I called. He turned his head. His face was ordinary and exhausted. He didn't look drunk. "I'm waiting for someone," he said. "She said she'd be back." He looked past me toward the road east. "Do you need me to call someone?" I asked. He shook his head once. "I said I'd wait," he repeated as if he were reminding himself. A bus sighed by. "I've got a scarf," I said. because it felt like something small I could do. I glanced to the passenger seat. The white scarf lay there, ordinary as laundry. I picked it up and held it out across the seat, under the 2-inch window gap. He looked at it, then at me. He didn't reach. "That's not hers," he said quietly. Then he smiled in a way that was more like a wince. "You should go," he added. "You shouldn't wait." He gestured vaguely east, as if anything he might say would be the wrong thing. I put the scarf back on the seat. "Okay," I said. "Be safe." He didn't answer. I drove away, back straight, fingers tight. In the mirror, he returned to his posture, arms folded, eyes on the road, as if it were a friend who had gone to bring the car around. I turned the radio off. The car's noises were enough. I turned onto a side street to take the long way home. My phone chirped once, not the ping for a ride, just a plain text tone. I checked at the next stop sign. It was a message with no number, no name. "Can you wait?" it said. I put the phone face down on the passenger seat. The scarf slid and brushed my sleeve. It was the lightest touch, and it was too much. I drove home like I could outrun a text. I didn't sleep. I sat in the car behind my building where the light above the door burns all night yellow. I listened to the heater click and the brakes settle. I locked the doors and then checked the locks twice. A cat walked the fence line like a guard. At around 4, the air changed. That's the only way to put it. Every winter morning, there's a moment when the night gives in, and the cold shifts from something holding you to something you're wearing. The neighborhood made a few gentle noises. Someone's coffee machine, someone's cough, a distant train. I put my forehead on the steering wheel. The car, which is more of a home sometimes than my apartment, hummed sweetly to itself. That's when someone knocked on my back right window. A polite knock, the kind you use when the door is already ajar. Once, then a pause, then again. I didn't move. I couldn't. I looked in the rear view. It showed what it always shows in the dark if you don't turn a light on. Your own eyes doubled. The knock came a third time. I let my hand find the switch and turned on the overhead light. In the bright, the car looked small and my lap looked foolish, keys still there on the lanyard like a child's safety rope. I turned slowly and looked at the back seat. No one sat there. The seatbelt on the driver's side rear hung at a precise angle, like someone had held it and then let it tilt back a notch. There was a patch of damp on the upholstery, round as if a small wet thing had rested and then left. I breathed as quietly as I could make myself. The knock did not happen again. The light hummed faintly. The heater sighed. When the sun finally made a gray out of the black, I went upstairs. My apartment felt like a place I rented from a stranger. I took the bus transfer ticket out of my wallet and put it in a drawer. The scarf I placed in a paper bag and took to the Goodwill drop the next day, then changed my mind and took it back out and stuffed it in the trunk under the emergency kit. None of it felt like action. It felt like sweeping snow off a porch while it's still snowing. Busy work for your hands so your mind has something to pretend at. I still drive. The city doesn't stop needing rides. People still get in and complain about egg prices and ask if I take Cash App. Sometimes I take Archer without meaning to. Sometimes I say her name in my head, the way you say a name of someone you knew in high school if a song reminds you of them. Like it's not summoning, but just acknowledging that a person once moved through a moment with you. Sometimes my brakes click just once, soft. When that happens, I say, very quietly so no one hears and thinks I'm talking to myself, I can't wait tonight. I don't know if it helps or if it's like wishes in a fountain, something you do because we are the kind of animals who do that. The last thing is small, and I know it will sound like proof to some and like nothing to others. It was 2 weeks ago, mid-shift, snow gone to dirty lace along the curb. I took a guy named Mateo from a bowling alley to his cousin's. He talked the whole time about a girl he'd met who had the exact same laugh as his mother. It was like hearing a memory, he said, touching his own throat with his fingers. When I dropped him off, I checked my app to mark the trip complete. Thanks for the ride. Banner slid up. I clicked it because habit is a kind of religion. A list appeared. Normal names. Then almost immediately it glitched. A name slid half into view and stopped, as if the app had thought better of it. Mary R. Cowan, it said again. The same 5 and then a hard line like the screen wouldn't give any more. For a heartbeat next to that name, a little message bubble appeared. The kind the app uses when a writer leaves a note. It said, he said he would wait. Then the bubble collapsed and the list reverted as if nothing had happened. I can hear someone reading this and saying, it's the app. It's the wind. It's your sister playing a trick. I hope that person is right. I hope this is code and coincidence. That would be kinder. But I've learned that some roads bend around the places where stories sleep, and some cars, no matter how carefully you drive them, pick up passengers who don't care what route you choose. If you drive late, you'll find your own version. A man on a curb with blood around his shoe who refuses a hospital. A woman who asks you to keep a secret so obvious it's not a secret at all. A kid who loses a glove and tells you he lost it on purpose because his mom keeps buying ugly ones. If you're local, you know the cemetery, I mean. If you don't go looking. If you still do, don't hop the fence. If you still do, don't touch the bars with bare hands in the cold. Bring someone with you who will believe you even when they're rolling their eyes. Keep a scarf in your car even if it's not hers. Keep your hands on the wheel when the brakes click like a polite knock. And if your phone blinks at you in that gray hour and asks if you can wait, you can say no. You can say you already did. You can say you're sorry. Maybe it will make no difference. Maybe it's the difference. Either way, if you find yourself going east on Archer on a night when the wind runs a finger along the iron like a comb, and you see a figure by the gate, and you tell yourself it is a trick of reflection and bad depth perception, well, maybe you're right. I hope you are. I'm telling you this because part of me is still on that road, watching taillights blur, waiting for a girl in a white coat to decide whether she's in the car or at the gate, whether the door is closed, whether she's cold, whether he will keep his word. For what it's worth, when I pass and the brakes click that tiny click, I hear it like a syllable. A small word said softly so as not to startle me. Not my name. Not hers, not now, not ever. Just a sound in the winter that knows we're all pretending we aren't waiting for someone to come back to the place where they said they'd meet us. Sometimes I press my foot a little heavier, and the click doesn't come again, and I think, okay, tonight it's just the car. Tonight it's just the wind. And then, inevitably, when I turn the next corner and the radio fizzles to a bright trumpet dance that has no business playing in 2025, I reach over and switch it off with a very gentle touch. The kind you use when you remember too late that there was a hand on the other side of the glass. I never thought I'd post anything like this, but last week I was scrolling through old photos on my phone, and that blue glow bled across the screen like a bruise. I almost dropped my phone. It's been 3 years since the night at Hollywood Forever, and every time I tell myself it was stress or a trick of light, something small brings it back. The wobble of a street lamp, a battery dying too fast, a reflection that isn't mine. I don't care if anyone believes me. I just need to put this somewhere other than my head. I used to take night photos as a way to keep my hands busy. I wasn't sleeping much then. My sister Maya kept telling me to find a routine. Walk the dog, drink water, shoot your weird long exposure stuff. My friend Diego, who runs a food truck off Melrose, had the idea to photograph cemeteries. Creepy, he said, but the marble looks like the moon if you get the angle right. Hollywood Forever was close, and if you sign the form and promise to stay on the main paths, the guards don't mind. I'd gone a couple times before sundown without anything weirder than a raccoon knocking over a soda can. The night I'm talking about started normal for LA. Warm air with that faint smell of jasmine and car exhaust. I parked on Gower right before Santa Monica Boulevard, where you can hear traffic as a steady hiss. Maya asked to tag along because she'd never been. We met Diego at the gate around 10 p.m. The guard in the kiosk had a Dodgers cap, a jelly donut on a napkin, and a look that said he'd heard every story and didn't care about any of them. His name tag said Rick. When I told him we were taking long exposure shots for a class, he slid the sign-in sheet to me and said, "Stay on the lit paths. If you see sprinklers come on, that's your cue to move." He paused, then added, "If you see a blue lantern floating, that's your cue to leave." He said it deadpan, no wink. Maya raised her eyebrows at me and Diego whispered, "Free prop, bro." Rick didn't smile. "People come here to be quiet," he said. "Don't be the reason I have to call LAPD." We walked in with our backpacks, tripods clacking against our shins. The cemetery was a patchwork of yellow light and dark shadow. Palm trees cut up the sky. One of those hazy nights when the stars looked like dust someone forgot to sweep. Sprinklers hissed somewhere to our left. A coyote yipped far off. Diego pretended he wasn't startled and then had to cough to cover it. The mausoleum of the cathedral was lit like a hotel lobby, which made everything outside it feel extra dark. Names I recognized from old movies were etched into warm stone. I kept my ISO low and tried to breathe steady. It started quiet, like it always does in stories you don't believe. The subtle wrongness you can only name later. My camera battery dropped from 60% to 20 in 5 minutes, like I'd opened a drain in it. Maya's phone would not stay focused. Diego cracked a joke about ghosts with magnets, but his voice didn't carry like usual. The air felt thick, like breathing through a sweater. I caught a faint noise coming from the pond beyond the Fairbanks lawn, the one where they do the summer movies. It sounded like someone running a finger around a crystal glass. A single note, thin and high. We moved toward it because, of course, we did. I know how that sounds. There were other people around. The kind of cemetery regulars you stop noticing in LA. A couple in workout gear cutting through. A guy walking a terrier that refused to leave a particular shrub. 2 teenagers sharing AirPods. A woman in a puffy jacket holding a flashlight with her elbow like a third hand. Normal background life. The hum from the pond deepened. My camera began picking up grain even with the tripod settled. The kind of fine noise that happens in an empty room when your ears are too open. At the pond, the water was a black mirror with a rim of lights, little bulbs strung along the walkway. We stood by the low chain. There was no fog, no mist, nothing dramatic. Just that sound, and then the faintest shift in the reflections as if one light doubled and then hovered off the surface. Still a reflection with nothing to reflect. It wasn't a lantern exactly. It was the idea of one. An oval of pale blue that looked like a breath held too long with a softness around the edges like a halo that won't stop moving. Diego said, "It's a drone," but he didn't sound sure. There was no whir, no insect noise. The hair on my forearms lifted. Maya squeezed my sleeve the way she does when she thinks I'm about to step into traffic. "Let's go back," she said, not quite a whisper. Behind us, a sprinkling system ticked on with a click and a hiss, and I jumped. We turned around to leave and nearly walked into Rick, the guard with the donut. His face was the kind of tired you can only get under fluorescent lights. "Didn't I say—" he started, but his eyes flicked over my shoulder toward the water and stopped. He wasn't doing a bit. His mouth flattened. "Okay," he said, voice lower. "We're going to step away. No fuss, no phones, keep your breathing easy." It would have been fine if the blue light had stayed where it was. It didn't. It lifted off the pond like something shrugging out of a coat. It wasn't bright. It was the opposite of bright. A glow that made the surrounding dark pay attention. As it rose, the hum slid down to a tone I felt in my chest more than I heard. My camera screen went black. Maya's phone flickered. Rick's walkie-talkie spat a burst of static and then the thin voice of another guard. "You got eyes?" Rick pressed the talk button but didn't say anything. The blue oval hovered above the path. The couple in workout gear had stopped to stare mid-step. The terrier sat, ears back, making small sounds it couldn't help. The 2 teenagers pulled out their AirPods, slow as if speed might attract attention. The woman with the puffy jacket folded her arms tight, the flashlight beam shaking. We all waited for someone to laugh or for a projector to turn off or a prank to show its seams. The city kept being the city. Sirens somewhere. Tires on wet pavement. A helicopter distant and indifferent. It drifted toward us. Not fast, just direct. It wasn't the size of a lantern anymore. It dilated or swam or whatever you call it when something in the air grows without moving closer. I felt it on my front teeth like a cold wind. "Behind me," Diego said. "Nope." And I heard the slap of his shoes turning him toward the gate. Maya didn't move because I didn't. Rick took one step to the side, placing himself between the light and the path behind us, and then realized how dumb that was and stopped. When the blue reached us, it didn't touch. That's the worst part. It stayed just far enough away that I might have convinced myself it was a reflection if everything else hadn't agreed it was real. My breath condensed even though the night was warm. The hum shaped itself into a pattern, a kind of question. I know this isn't scientific. It felt like the sound when you stare at a word too long and it stops being a word. The blue wavered, not like fire, more like a pulse. I raised my hand without deciding to. I wish I could say something noble made me do it. Honestly, it was the reflex you get when someone offers you a ball to catch. Rick hissed, "Don't!" and I stopped with my fingers inches from the air in front of it. That's when my dad's keychain lit up in my pocket. It's a cheap novelty with a little LED you squeeze. It hadn't worked in months. I felt it heat against my thigh, then fade. The blue swelled and contracted like it was breathing, just once, in time with my heartbeat. There's an old story the guards tell about a homeless man who woke up screaming. About laughter cut too wide, Rick didn't say it. but I saw a version of it pass through his head. The way people get when a thing they joke about steps into the room. He did something then that probably saved us. He talked. Not the "hey, get out of here" voice. The voice you use with a dog at the vet. "Okay," he said to the air. "Okay, we see you. We're going to go now. Thank you." He kept saying thank you in different ways, like he was fumbling with a door he couldn't see. "I appreciate it. We're leaving. You look great tonight. The lawn is closed." It sounds ridiculous, but the blue paused. I felt pressure ease in my sinuses, the way an airplane's cabin does when the pilot fixes something and you didn't know anything needed fixing. Maya made a small sound. I moved my hand back. My fingers ached like I'd been holding a freezing coin. The light drifted left over the edge of the path and into the grass and then slid sideways through the names. It didn't pass through the stone. It avoided it like the stones were hotter than the air. Diego reappeared beside us, sweating hard, breath loud. "The gate wouldn't open," he said, and his laugh came out wrong. We walked. Calm, the way animals walk when the barn is on fire and they are pretending it isn't. Rick radioed a code I didn't understand. The blue followed at a distance, not a stalk so much as a parallel. Every time we passed a pool of light from a lamp, it dimmed, and as soon as we moved back into shadow, it flared again. The sprinklers clicked off, and the silence after they stopped was sudden and wet. I kept looking at the ground to make sure my shoes stayed on concrete. Near the gate, there's a row of low crypts with photos in the plaques, sepia faces that look right at you. We passed them. One of the pictures showed a young woman with a bob haircut and eyes that would have been called daring in the 1920s. As we moved by, her photo flashed blue. Not bright, more awash like moonlight poured through glass, and for half a second her expression changed. I don't care how that sounds. I saw her eyes tilt toward us, the tiniest, and then back again. The blue hummed once, as if pleased. Rick got us to the kiosk. He didn't scold. He didn't tell us not to tell anyone. He kept his cap on and his mouth tight and wrote the time by our names like we'd checked out of a library. "If you feel sick later," he said, "drink Gatorade. Don't take anything that says energy. Avoid mirrors until morning." He must have seen our faces. "Humor me," he added. "People get a little wired." We went to the parking lot. My key fob wouldn't unlock the car. I had to do it manual like a caveman. Inside, the dashboard clock blinked 12 even though I never unset it. Maya sat beside me with both hands flat on her thighs. Diego leaned against his truck and rubbed his chest like it hurt. A patrol car rolled by slow. 2 cops inside doing that around the block glide that means they don't want to get out. The blue light didn't follow us over the property line. When we pulled away and checked the rear view, it was gone. The rest is small things, and maybe those are worse. I got home and the light in my fridge turned blue for a second when I opened it. My apartment smelled like lake water, just a hint, right before my AC kicked on. When I closed my eyes that night, a single high note threaded between my thoughts like floss. I woke up past sunrise with my shoes on. For a week afterward, anything reflective felt a degree colder. Windows, spoons, the black screen of my TV before it wakes. I caught myself smiling without meaning to. Not a creepy smile, just an overcorrection my face made when my brain went blank. That part scared me more than the light. I was acting like a host after the party, saying thanks to an empty room. We all tried not to talk about it. When we did, we used the wrong words on purpose. That LED thing, Maya would say. Diego would call it the balloon, to make it smaller. Rick texted once, 2 days later, from a number he must give to the regulars. "Everyone good?" I replied, "Yeah," and he wrote back, "Thought so. Watch your batteries." That same day I found my dad's keychain at the bottom of my backpack, warm to the touch even though it was under a metal thermos. I know someone will ask for photos. I have 3 frames where the blue is a smear that could be a lens flare and could be nothing. In one, if you crank the exposure up, the smear sits between the pond and a row of gravestones. And a little farther back, there's a figure walking a small dog. When I zoom in, the dog's ears are pinned and its body is a comma of tension. You can't prove fear with pixels. I still don't post that one anywhere. I keep deleting it and finding it again in the recently deleted folder, which I know is how phones work, but still. A month later, I was at Cinespia with Maya and some coworkers for a movie night on the lawn. The cemetery felt harmless with hundreds of people and food trucks and a screen the size of a house. During the previews, the projector misfired for half a second, a blue blink across the crowd. Heads lifted like animals smelling rain. Nothing happened. People cheered when the film started. I let myself relax. Halfway through, a helicopter dragged its noise over the city and the screen flickered. My sister leaned to my ear and said, not loud, not scared, as if telling me the time, "Don't look at the pond." I didn't. We watched the rest. I laughed when I was supposed to. Afterward, when the lawn emptied and people shuffled their blankets into tote bags, I went to fill our water bottle at the fountain and noticed a dark streak on my wrist where a watch would go, though I don't wear one. A thin line like something had rested there and blocked the sun. That could be anything. A strap from my camera. A pressure mark from sleep. The fountain's metal curved into a vague mirror, and for a breath my reflection grinned wider than I felt. Not grotesque, just a little too certain. My mouth closed on its own and the line on my wrist itched. Last week, when that blue bled across my phone while flipping through my old shots, I opened the front camera to check if the tint was in my apartment or on the screen. The image that came up was me in my dim kitchen, hair sticking up, eyes rimmed, very human. Behind me, in the microwave glass, the smallest wash of color rose like a breath. It faded when I turned. The hum I'd forgotten I was living with stopped for a beat and then came back, faint as ever. I stood there listening to my refrigerator and the traffic and the thin, high note that's followed me since, wondering whether the light is outside me or something I picked up and carry now like a spare battery I never asked for. If you go to Hollywood forever at night, be respectful. Stay on the lit paths, like Rick says. If you hear the single note, don't pretend you didn't. Say thank you even if you feel ridiculous. Keep your hands at your sides. Avoid mirrors until morning. And if a blue glow lifts off the water and breathes with you, remember this. Not every lantern needs to be held. Some of them are already inside, waiting to be seen. I wasn't planning to post this anywhere, but the sound followed me home and I'm out of ideas, so maybe writing it down will make it stop or at least make me feel less crazy. I live in Tucson, and my sister Lena and I took a weekend drive last spring to Tombstone because our dad used to drag us there for history days when we were kids. He loved the reenactments and the penny candy and the old headstones with the crooked epitaphs. He passed 3 years ago, and I guess we were trying to remember him in a place that always felt like a set. We booked a cheap room at the Silver Saddle Motel, the one with the flickering sign on Allen Street. The carpet was thin and dusty even after the vacuum lines, and the bathroom fan made a whining sound that brought back every road trip stop we ever made as a family. Lena is a nurse who works nights, and she crashes early on her days off. I'm a delivery driver and I keep odd hours, so I wandered like always with my camera. We planned to hit Boot Hill Cemetery at sunset, the way Dad liked it, when the light slides across the names and everything looks older than it is. The day we arrived was clear and clean the way desert air can be after wind. You could smell creosote and gasoline. A gray Dodge pickup idled outside the motel office. The owner, a thin woman with a silver ponytail and sun-faded tattoos, checked us in. She asked if we were in town for the festival. We weren't. She said, "Well, you'll see more people than usual at Boot Hill tonight. They like to line up for pictures." I said we'd wait until later when it thinned out. She warned the gate can be chained after dark, and I said we'd be quick. I noticed a pair of old boots under the office window, soles up. They were scuffed and hand-stitched and looked like they'd been pulled from an attic trunk. I made some comment about perfect decor. She looked at them a second too long and said, "Those aren't decor. Somebody left them there." Her tone made me stop. "When?" I asked. She tapped the glass with her fingernail. "This morning." "People are funny." I shrugged and we rolled our bags to the room. Lena took the bed by the bathroom so she could get up in the night. She always claims the inside half. I took the bed by the window. There was a slow, regular click from somewhere in the wall, like a cooling heater. It wasn't alarming, just irritating, like a metronome you can't find. We rested for an hour, then met our friend Marco at Big Nose Kate's for dinner. Marco is a photographer I know from Tucson who loves weathered wood and rusting metal. He had been shooting in Bisbee and detoured to meet us. He's the kind of guy who will sit in the sun for an hour to catch a shadow sliding across a nail. He also thinks he's funny in a quiet way, making little jokes and then looking at you to see if you caught them. We ate burgers and watched tourists take photos of each other with the actors who wander around in dusters and prop guns. A couple of them had spurs, real ones that jingled when they made a show of spinning. But you can tell the difference between a jingle meant to be heard and a sound that was made without meaning to. That matters later. We walked to Boot Hill just as the sky flattened to dark blue and the first star came out over the tailings pile. I don't know if you've ever been, but the cemetery sits up on the edge of town. hugging a dry slope with a view of highway lights and the low glare of gas stations. It's fenced, not tall, and the road gravel crunches in a way that carries. There were a few families drifting back toward their cars when we arrived. The last of the sun made the headstones glow like they had their own weak light. Then it was just us and one older couple in matching windbreakers. The caretaker had stuck a laminated sign near the gate about respect and no climbing and please no rubbings. A donation box rattled when I tapped it with a quarter. Lena tucked her hair into a cap because the wind had started up again. Marco set his tripod and shot the path that winds through the names. I wandered among the mounds, reading, half talking to Dad in my head, telling him we'd finally made it back without him, which felt like the wrong kind of success. The first odd thing wasn't odd by itself. I heard spurs somewhere behind me. A slow step with little metal chimes, and I turned expecting to see one of the actors lingering, or a tourist wearing a costume. There was no one. The couple had moved down the slope. Marco and Lena were near the fenced-off section where the unknowns are. The sound drifted, but there was no body to it. It came again, closer, heel scrape, and I still didn't see anything except a dust devil leaning on a thorn bush. I told myself the gravel can mimic a lot of noises when it shifts under your feet. I made my own steps heavier to test the sound. It didn't match. Lena called to me to look at the sky over the gas station, where a long ribbon of cloud glowed like metal. We took pictures and the sound didn't come again for a while. The second odd thing happened when we reached the back where the names thin out and the markers are small white picks set in a row. I kept getting the sense of someone walking just out of my line of sight and stopping whenever I turned. The classic feeling, right? But it wasn't just that. The cemetery smells like sun-baked dirt and old wood, and for a few seconds I caught a different smell. Sharp and animal, like oiled leather. Marco noticed me sniffing and laughed. "You smell the west," he said. Then he stopped and said, "Wait," and crouched near the path. He pointed to a print in the dust. It was a boot print, not modern because the heel was high and there were outlined nail heads. There were a few in a line, coming from a space between two plots where no one had walked since the family and windbreakers had left, then turning toward a mound with no name. The prints were not sharp, but they were fresh enough to be darker, as if the top layer of dust had been brushed aside recently. Lena nibbled her fingernail and said, "People wear old boots here to be cute." And maybe that was true. I wanted it to be true. Marco took a photo. The air hissed through the creosote and the light went dull. The donation box clinked again behind us, which made us all turn. No one had touched it. The wind could swing the lid, but the lid wasn't moving. I told myself coins settle sometimes. Our phones buzzed together with a text from the Silver Saddle reminding guests of quiet hours and parking rules. Small town life. We took that as our cue to leave. As we walked back, a guy in a baseball cap and deputy's shirt stepped out from the shade near the gate, nodding hello. He had a mustache and the square look of a man who takes up space on purpose. He said, "Evening." I asked if we were okay to be there after sunset. He said, "Technically closed, but I'm not gonna fuss. Just don't climb anything." Then he squinted at the ground the way dads do when they are about to point out something you missed and said, "Y'all got friends in Spurs?" I said no. He pointed to the gravel at our feet. There were prints I hadn't seen on the way in. The same old boot pattern crossing the path through ours and up into the plots. The deputy looked at me the way a teacher waits, giving you time to notice the answer yourself. He said, "Usually when I see that, folks are messing around, usually." He let the last word hang. He wrote his name on a small card and handed it to us. "Harris," he said, "call if anyone gives you trouble." The wind had picked up enough to lift grit against our shins. We said goodnight and walked back to the car. The sound came once more behind us, that patient heel scrape. Lena squeezed my sleeve and said, "Please get in." Back at the motel, we sat on the curb outside our door and listened to the humming soda machine and the faint noise from the saloons. The stars were bright and the air had that spring coolness you hope for after a hot day. Marco scrolled through his shots and whistled at a few. He held one up to show us the print near the unknowns. His phone had caught something else I hadn't seen, maybe just the way the dust had run, but it looked like another print overlapping slightly, pointing the other direction, like someone had stopped and turned. It made me feel like I was looking at a crossword answer I shouldn't understand yet. "I'll edit it tomorrow," he said. He likes to bring up contrast until rust looks like velvet. Lena yawned and went inside. She locked the door out of habit and then unlocked it and locked it again, like she sometimes does before bed. I stayed out with Marco until the cool got into us. He said he might drive back to Bisbee after all, because the sky there had been interesting the night before. I made a joke about him leaving us in the haunted motel. He laughed. "It's all haunted," he said, "but by different things." Then he flicked the butt of his cigarette carefully into the can by the ice machine because he's conscientious even when he's exhausted. And he left us with a two-finger wave and the sound of gravel under tires. The next sound that mattered woke me around 2. It was that same heel scrape timing, a step and then a dragging pause coming along the walkway outside our window. The Silver Saddle has those aluminum-framed windows that don't seal well, so you hear everything. I lay still. The bathroom fan clicked once like it had a hiccup. The steps stopped outside our door and then started again, moving past to the next room, then back. Lena sat up, hair tangled, one eye squinting, and said, "Do you hear?" I nodded. We both stared at the bottom edge of the door where the light from the walkway cut a thin silver bar across the carpet. Something crossed the light and dimmed it for a second. The steps turned away toward the stairs. We didn't speak while it was there because we didn't want it to answer. After it passed, Lena let out a breath and laughed, the nervous kind. "Drunk guy," she said, but her voice rose at the end like a question. I wanted to look out the window, but I didn't. And maybe you'll think I'm a coward for that. But I've learned the hard way that there's a line between curiosity and inviting something to know your name. We slept poorly. At dawn, the wind rattled the chain-link fence around the motel pool. When I swung my feet out of bed, my toes brushed grit. There was a small scatter of dust on the carpet by the door, cast in a dark shape like it had fallen through a stencil. The shape from a distance looked like the outline of a high heel with a broad base. I told myself it was fine, just somebody's boots brushing against the threshold when they passed. Lena looked at it, didn't say anything, and carried her bag to the bathroom like it weighed more than it should. We checked out by leaving the key on the counter. The owner wasn't there. The boots under the office window were gone. We met Marco for breakfast at a diner by the highway. He looked tired, but his mood was bright from a shot he'd taken of a truck graveyard in Bisbee under stars. He told us he had slept in his car halfway back, which he does when he's in a groove. I asked if he had heard anything odd in the night. He frowned. I was awake around 2. I kept hearing when someone drags a dolly across a loading dock? A scuff and then a metal tick. I thought I was just keyed up. He rubbed his shin absently and then stopped. "Woke up with dust on my pants," he said. He brushed at it like it might still be there. The waitress poured coffee and put down a basket of tiny creamers. Her name tag said Maria. She said, "You go up to the cemetery last night? People in small towns can tell in a second if you're there for the dirt or the show." I nodded. She tipped her head at my camera bag and then at Lena's cap. "You heard it then?" She said it so simply that Lena and I both waited, hungry for the exact words we were too embarrassed to say ourselves. "Boots," Maria said, shrugging. "Always with the boots." She set down a plate of pancakes like she hadn't said anything odd at all, and moved on to a table of retirees discussing a camping trip. I took a deep breath and said, "You get a lot of that?" Maria shrugged again. "People like to tell stories, especially after a beer. Sometimes you hear it yourself. Gravel plays tricks." She said it in a voice that made the idea of gravel playing tricks sound like a weather forecast you had to accept, even if you didn't like it. We decided to drive back to the cemetery in daylight before we left town, because it felt like leaving the stove on not to check. The morning was bright and flat. A school bus clattered past. The caretaker was there, a tall man with a broad-brimmed hat and a shirt 2 shades too blue, scrubbing graffiti off the donation box with a sponge. His name, from a badge pinned to his chest, was Harrow. He gave us that tourist smile that says, "Please buy water from the cooler by the gate." I said we had been there last night. He nodded like he'd been there too. "You hear them?" he said. He didn't make us ask what he meant. He tapped his sponge on the edge of the bucket and looked out over the graves. "I tell people it's traffic and the wind," he said, "but you can tell who came here to listen and who came here to be listened to." I didn't like the sound of that last part. "What do you mean?" Lena asked. Harrow tipped his chin at my feet. "Some folks come in with boots on. They leave lighter." He squatted and put a hand to the ground like a farmer feeling soil. He said, soft like he was talking to the dirt itself, Some of them leave their boots behind. He pointed with his chin to a mound near the back. It was a low swell of earth under a mesquite, with a plain board marker that said simply unknown. Set on top of the mound were a pair of boots, neatly side by side, toes pointing toward town. They were not the ones from the motel window. These were darker, with a cut along one seam and a small star punched into the spur straps. They looked placed, not dropped. Harrow said, "Don't touch." He didn't need to warn us. This was the desert, where everything rusty and old is either a museum or a trap. We stood there too long. Marco took a photo, then another from a lower angle. He's good at making ordinary things look like they've been waiting to be seen forever. I felt the urge to straighten the boots, though they were already straight. That urge felt wrong, like wanting to clean up a stranger's bathroom. Lena whispered something about a story Dad told us once, about a prospector who got lost and followed bootsteps into a wash and never came back. I remembered the way Dad's voice had changed when he told that one, like he didn't want to pass the rhythm of it to me. Harrow said, "They'll be gone tomorrow," and I must have looked like I wanted to know who took them because he said, "I don't know who takes them. I just know I walk by and they're not there, and later, maybe weeks later, there's another pair somewhere else. Tourists bring flowers. Whoever it is brings boots." We started back toward the gate. The wind picked up and pressed our shirts against us. It carried a sound like a small bell. I thought of cattle, but there were no cattle near. The sound stopped, then came again, matched to the rhythm you already know. I told myself it was a piece of junk hanging from someone's rearview mirror catching wind. Marco's phone buzzed with a call. He made a face at the screen and stepped away to answer. "Hey," he said, then, "No, I'm still in Tombstone," and then his face changed like he was trying to hear someone in a tunnel. He said, "What?" "I can't, hang on," and held the phone to his other ear. He said, "I don't understand." He hung up and looked at us. "That was the number I bought the camera from last year," he said. "It shouldn't be calling me." He showed us the screen. The number was as unremarkable as any. He called back. It rang once and then cut out. He put the phone down and we all listened, because I have learned that sometimes if you turn off one sense, the others will tell you what you missed. The wind fell away for a breath and we heard the step again, closer, impatient. Harrow lifted his head like a coyote, scenting something, and said, "Go on now." Not to us. When we reached the gate, a man in his 30s with a sunburned neck and a trucker hat was standing there, hands on the fence. He had a sullen, embarrassed look, the kind of expression a person gets when they've been caught staring at something private. He glanced at us, then down quickly. On the ground beside him was a paper bag, the kind you get from a thrift store. The top was folded down twice. The man hesitated, then set the bag inside the gate and stepped back. He nodded at Harrow without meeting his eyes. He said to no one, "Don't know what else to do," and walked fast to a white truck and drove away without looking in the mirror. Harrow sighed. He didn't open the bag. He said, "People bring things." He stood there until the truck's noise was gone. Then he picked up the bag and set it carefully on the donation box. He didn't peek. I don't know what I expected him to do, but somehow this quiet respect bothered me more than any ghost hunting flourish would have. We said goodbye. Harris, the deputy from the night before, was parked up the road with his window down, talking to a woman who was walking an old dog. He lifted 2 fingers at us like Marco had the night before, the lazy salute of officers everywhere. We drove out across the cattle guard and the boards clanked under the tires. I glanced in the rear view at the gate, and for a second I saw shadow in the gap where the 2 halves meet, like someone standing just behind the fence looking out. It could have been any dark shape. It could have been the donated bag. The rest of the drive home felt like when you shut a bad story in the fridge with leftovers. You think you'll forget it until you open the door again. Lena fell asleep against the window. We listened to AM radio that faded in and out with news about a brush fire and a high school baseball score. We didn't talk about boots because saying the word seemed like it might summon the sound itself. At home, the first thing I noticed after I set my bag down was a smear of fine dust along the inside of my front door, low to the floor, like wind had pushed it under from the outside. Except the storm door had been closed all weekend. I swept it up and told myself I walked in weird and dragged it from the mat. I showered. Lena texted that she'd made it back to her place and was going to nap before her shift. Marco sent a photo of a sign in some Bisbee antique shop that said, "Use stairs at your own risk." He wrote, "Haunted sign wants your content," and I sent laughing emojis that didn't feel right on my screen. Around 9 that night, while I was making a sandwich and trying not to think about gravel, my apartment filled with a soft clicking I couldn't place. It took me a minute to track it to the hall. I walked there slowly with my knife still in my hand in this dumb way that would make a mess of any real situation. The CO2 detector on the hallway ceiling chirped and flashed a low battery light. I exhaled and said out loud, "Okay." I got a chair and took it down and replaced the battery from the drawer where I keep everything that makes me look like I have a plan. When I set it back, I heard the clock in the bedroom begin again. It had stopped while I was gone and I hadn't noticed. Regular steady ticks filled the space. The place felt normal again. The kind of normal that makes you go to bed slightly smug because you fixed something. The steps outside my door started up just after midnight. Not stomping, not rushed. The steady heel scrape I had heard everywhere since the cemetery. There are 6 apartments on my floor. Everyone has their habits. Mrs. Franklin in 3B takes her trash out after the late news. The yoga guy in 3F clops and flip-flops. This was neither. It moved past my door, stopped, and then went the other way as if coming back to check. I sat on the floor with my back to the bed and watched the bottom of the door for that thin scrape of shadow, like I had at the motel. There it was, a slow dark arc right to left, like someone's weight shifting. Then the steps moved away. I waited long minutes, longer than I could count without losing track, and then I stood and checked the peephole. The hallway was empty. I opened the door the smallest amount I could and leaned my face into the cool slit of air and listened. The elevator hummed somewhere. The rest was quiet. On the floor right against my threshold, there was a narrow fan of dust, splayed like a heel had turned there and paused. I shut the door and slid the chain because I don't know what else you're supposed to do. The next morning, Marco called early. He sounded unlike himself, like he'd been running or had just missed a step in the dark and felt it all the way up his spine. He said, "Do you have a minute?" He never says that. He usually just launches into a theory about light. I said yes. He said, "I don't want to make this a thing, but I think somebody was in my car last night." He described waking around 2 to the sound of something brushing the gravel near where he had parked off the highway to catch star trails. He assumed it was a coyote. He had only cracked the window for air. The sound came closer, heel scrape like dragging a pallet. He could feel it in the car more than hear it, in the way everything got expectant. He sat up and grabbed the flashlight and shined it through the fog of his breath. "No one," he said. "But, look, this is dumb." He trailed off. I waited. He said, "When I turned the light off, the car shifted like someone had leaned against the door. Not hard, just enough to push the suspension. I told myself it was wind. Then this morning my back seat had dust on it, in the middle where no one sits." He laughed because he hates sounding superstitious. He is a man who likes proof. "Tell me I'm dumb," he said. I said he was sleep-deprived and his brain wanted patterns. "Yes," he said, grabbing at it. "Patterns. We both wanted that to be the word." Then he said, much quieter, "Do you hear it now?" I didn't. He hung up because a delivery guy was knocking at his door with a package. He told me to come by later to see a new lens he was excited about. I said sure. That afternoon, I took the bus past the university where students in shorts were eating on the lawn like nothing bad ever happens in sunlight. I got to Marco's apartment and found his door ajar. Not open. That perfect 2 inches that always looks like an invitation and a dare. I knocked. He called from inside for me to come in. He was kneeling on the floor facing an empty space where his coffee table usually sits. He had moved it to vacuum, he said, because he'd tracked dust in. He pointed to the rug. I didn't see anything at first. Then I did. A faint oval, darker than the rest, like something had rested there for a while. Not a boot. The outline wasn't sharp enough for that. More like a satchel or a sack. He said, "That bag we saw on the donation box." I said, "You get a delivery?" He shook his head. The package had been for his neighbor. They'd mixed up the numbers. He picked at the edge of the oval with his fingernail like it might peel. It didn't. We tried to talk ourselves down. We made coffee. We drank it standing up. We kept avoiding the words we needed to say because sometimes saying a thing is like turning a key. The mail slot rattled once with no one on the other side. He went to pick up the flyers and paused. He looked at me with his eyebrows folded and said, "Hear it?" He meant the smallest sound, the faintest metal tick. The air has a way of making normal house noises perform for you when you expect them. This was different. In the quiet between the hums of the refrigerator and the pop of the wall heater, a patient heel scrape moved across the hallway outside. We both froze. The lock on his front door is one of those knobs that click softly when weight rests against the door. It clicked. Not a knock, just pressure. Marco mouthed, "Don't," when I started to move. We stood there for a long time, listening to a sound that felt like it could go on as long as we did and longer. It stopped. He whispered, "Let's get out of here," and grabbed his keys and camera bag. He looked at his boots by the door, the ones he wears when he shoots in the brush, dusty and scarred, and then he didn't put them on. He slid his feet into sneakers and left the boots where they were. We walked fast down the stairs. On the landing, dust had gathered in a curve like someone had pivoted there too many times. This could all be explained by 100 mundane things. Construction dust from an upstairs renovation, a neighbor with a limp, our own weird attention. I am not telling you this to make you believe in ghosts. I'm telling you because sometimes something wants to be noticed in a way that makes your noticing feel like payment. We drove to Lemon View Park, sat on a bench where we could pretend the sound of kids on scooters was all the noise there is. We talked about work and about my dad and Tombstone and whether Lena would go back to nights. All the safe topics you use to build a shelter. Then Marco's phone rang again with the same number from the thrift camera. He answered, put it on speaker so I could hear too. It was empty, just air, but not the dead kind. It had corners. He said hello twice. The call ended. Moments later, my phone buzzed with a new voicemail from an unknown number. I don't give out my number. I played it. It was 21 seconds long. The first part was clothing noise or the sound of fabric swinging on a body. Then heel scrape, matching the length of the message like a metronome. No voice, just the regular patience of someone who could do this all day. I didn't tell Lena right away because she needed sleep, and because I thought maybe not telling would stop it. That night I stacked my boots by the door like I always do. I went to bed with the AC on to make a blanket of noise. I woke at 2 to the AC off and the room full of the kind of quiet that lets you hear the kitchen clock in units you don't want to measure. The steps started outside. They went down the hall past Mrs. Franklin's, paused, came back. They stopped at my door. The bottom edge of the door turned dark. My boots inside the apartment, my own boots, shifted a fraction on the mat like someone had nudged them with a toe to see if they would hold. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I thought of the boots at the cemetery, paired and pointed toward town, the way things are displayed for the living. The steps moved away. I lay there until my muscles hurt from not moving. In the morning, the boots were where I had left them, but there was a narrow ruffle of dust around them like skim on coffee. There were prints too, but my apartment carpet can show you whatever it thinks will keep you inside. I rubbed my eyes and told myself again that this would pass if we ignored it. That's when Lena called, low and panicky, asking if I had talked to Marco. He hadn't answered her texts since midnight. He does this sometimes when he's in a tunnel, but he always tells someone. I biked to his place. The door was closed now, locked. I could hear his radio inside. A baseball game at low volume, an announcer making every pitch sound like the end of the world. I knocked, called, knocked again. I went downstairs to the landlord's office. The landlord, a guy with a comb-over who always smelled like eucalyptus mints, came up and let me in, after I said what I said about checking on a friend. We walked in and the first thing I saw was my friend's boots by the door, placed side by side, toes toward the living room. Next to them, on the rug where the coffee table had been, was that same oval of darker dust as if a bag had rested there again and had been lifted. Marco's camera bag was gone. His keys were gone. His wallet was on the counter. The landlord scratched his neck and said, maybe he went out early. The baseball announcer called a double like the declaration of a truce in a language none of us spoke. I touched the waistband of the rug with my shoe and the dust broke like ash. I called Deputy Harris, whose card was still in my pocket like I'd known I would need it. He asked me to slow down 3 times. He asked for a description. He asked when we had last seen him. He said adults leave sometimes, the way cops have to say, and then he said, but I'll put out a notice. He didn't tell me to calm down. I appreciated that. He didn't ask me about boots. I appreciated that more. He said he'd swing by Marco's place himself. I went home and did the least useful thing, which was pace. When I do that, I wear a path in my rug like a pet. I passed the boots by my door a dozen times, then picked them up and moved them into the closet. and shut the door on them like they were appliances I didn't need. Around noon, a package showed up at my door with no return address. It was a shoebox taped in that careful way people do when they are trying to make something look undisturbed. I looked at it for a long time. I took it into the kitchen, set it on the table, and made myself wash my hands like I was about to cook just to buy more time. Then I opened the box. Inside was paper, brown and smelling like old closets. Inside the paper were boots, not mine, not Marco's. Dark, scuffed, with a cut along one seam and a small star punched into the spur strap. The same boots we had seen at the unknown mound or their brothers. A slip of paper lay under them. It wasn't a note. It was a receipt from a thrift store in Sierra Vista. Rounded letters listing assorted footwear, 2, assorted books, 3, and a date. I set the boots back in the paper like I was putting a baby to sleep and stepped away. I called Lena. She came over, looked at the boots, and sat down without touching anything. She said very quietly, "Just return them." It sounded like she was saying a prayer. I did return them. I drove to the thrift store, the one on the edge of town with faded pennants and a cracked window taped expertly. The cashier was a teenage boy with acne and a serious face. I put the box on the counter and said I'd received the wrong package and could he take it back into the pile. He nodded like he gets at least one unexplainable box a week. He set it gently behind the counter and rolled a piece of tape over the edge as if to fasten it to the world. I felt a small lift, like we had outmaneuvered something by playing dumb. I went home. The afternoon passed like afternoons do when you're waiting, slow for hours, and then suddenly it was dusk. My phone stayed silent, which was worse than any ring. Just after sunset, as if the dark had unlocked the day's next part, Deputy Harris called from an unknown number. He said, "We found your friend's car out by Charleston Road, parked clean. No sign of struggle. No sign of him." He said, "There were boot prints in the dirt near the front bumper, the old kind with nail heads. But I see those all the time out there. People wear vintage." He said it in a voice that said he knew how bad that sounded. He promised they would look, and he meant it. He told me not to go out there, and I said okay, even though I had already put my jacket on. After we hung up, I stood in my apartment and listened, because sometimes that is the only way to honor someone you can't help. The steps started up again, in the hallway outside. Heel scrape, not rushing, never rushing. They stopped at my neighbor's, moved on, came back. They paused at my door, the shadow dimming my rug. Then the sound did something it hadn't done before. It continued, but from inside my apartment. Not loud, not dramatic, just present. Heel scrape in my living room across the kitchen tile, toward the table where the box had been and was not. The sound stopped there, like someone had reached and found empty air. The refrigerator motor kicked on, and it was like a black curtain dropped over the thing we were not supposed to hear. I stood without breathing. My knees ached from standing too long. Then something thumped softly in the closet by the door. Not a crash. The kind of small thud your boots make when they settle against one another after they've been moved. I slept on the couch with the lamp on. At 4 a.m, my phone buzzed with a voicemail. No missed call, just the voicemail like it had been placed into the phone by hand. I played it. The first sound was wind. The second was the patient heel scrape. The third was a voice I recognized, Marco, sounding like he was calling through a scarf. He said, "It's not about seeing it." There was a long breath. He said, "It's about being seen." The message ended there, mid-breath, without the useless recorded voice telling me when it had been left. I played it 3 times until the words wore thinner. I whispered, "I'm here," like he could hear me through time. I told myself people leave. Adults leave sometimes. Adults sometimes need to leave their boots by the door to feel like they can pick them up again when they come back. I stood up because lying down felt like giving permission. I opened the closet. My boots were there where I'd shoved them, and beside them, the empty rectangle where another pair had rested, or hadn't. It's hard to tell what's missing when you can't name it. This is the part where I say it's over or it got worse. It didn't do either. It went sideways. Days pass. The steps come and go the way the trash truck does and the ice cream truck does and the guy who plays sax on the corner when he's sober. Lena visits more often, sits on the floor with me, both of us listening and then pretending we're not listening. Deputy Harris called once to say they'd pulled a report from Sierra Vista about a paper bag left on the porch of a closed thrift store with a pair of boots inside. He didn't say my name, but he paused like he was waiting for me to say something I couldn't. Maria from the diner sent me a photo someone had put on a local Facebook group. A pair of boots resting on the wall near the Boot Hill gate, toes toward the road. She wrote, "People bring things," with a rolling eyes emoji and then a heart, because that's how we talk now. Harrow, if he knows anything more, hasn't said it. Maybe he knows better than to try to tidy the wrong kind of mess. Every night near 2, the steady heel scrape sometimes comes back, like the world is a long hallway and the thing in it is patient beyond clocks. Sometimes it passes my door and stops at the far end where the exit sign hums. Sometimes it's in my kitchen again for a breath and then gone, like it remembered something it left behind and then remembered that it never owned it. Sometimes there's nothing and the quiet feels like a favor. When I can't sleep, I drive south with the windows down and the radio low. The desert smells the way it always has. Gasoline, dust, creosote after a trace of rain. If I park on the shoulder and listen, I hear the wind and the ticking of the engine cooling and sometimes the small jingle of the keychain against the dash. There are 1,000 ways to make a small bell sound in the dark. You can call them all by other names if you want. I don't know what happened to Marco. I don't know why anyone would mail me a pair of boots, or how anyone could have known which boots would make my hands cold to hold. I don't know if the prospector in my dad's story was real, or if that story is just the shape our town gives to a certain kind of leaving. I do know this. When you visit Boot Hill or any place where the ground has learned people's names by heart, there are sounds that are not for you and sounds that are very much for you. You can tell the difference by how you find yourself walking differently the next day without realizing it, as if you're saving your heels for something else. Lena says to end this by asking anyone who reads it not to go out there at night. Not because anything will necessarily happen, but because some places work better when you let them be the ones doing the watching. I want to promise you that if you don't listen for the boots, they won't listen back. I want to promise you a lot of things, but last week, after a few quieter days when I almost felt silly for buying new batteries for the detectors and for keeping the closet door taped, I woke up at 2 without knowing why and sat up before the sound, like my body had been called by name. The heel scrape started then, patient as always, moving down the hall toward me away and then returning in a way that felt like someone marking time. When it stopped, there was a pause of perfect silence. In that pause, I heard the softest sound of all, the faint slide of leather against leather, like a man gently taking off his boots in the dark so he won't wake anyone, setting one beside the other, toes pointing toward town. I lay back down and looked at the ceiling and waited for sleep. It didn't come, but something else did, something like a thought that isn't a thought. I don't care if anyone believes me. I'm writing this down so that if you ever hear that slow step in gravel when you're alone, you'll know not to answer. And if you find boots you didn't put there, sitting politely on the top of something old, you'll know to leave them, even if they look exactly like the pair you were sure you locked away. I've rolled this around in my head for years like a song you can't turn off. And tonight I'm finally typing it out because sleeping with earplugs in feels like surrender. I know how this will sound. Internet strangers are going to say it's an urban legend. A copy of a copy. Fine. I'd say the same if it hadn't happened to me and to my sister, and to a friend who won't answer my calls anymore. Back in 2016, I was living in Lawrence, Kansas, working nights at a grocery store and crashing at my sister Ellie's apartment over a laundromat. It was one of those off-campus buildings where the carpet always smelled faintly of coin soap and warm pennies. Ellie was a grad student then, all caffeine and sticky notes, and she hated thunderstorms. I used to make fun of her for the way she clicked her teeth when she was nervous. Little taps like she was counting something. Bruxism, her dentist said. Mouthguard at night. You grind like a trash compactor, he told her. She laughed, but she wore that plastic guard religiously. My friend Jay worked the night desk at a motel out by the highway. We'd meet around 2 a.m. when the bar traffic calmed down and swap stories in the fluorescent hum of the self-checkout lanes. He liked weird places. Drained quarries. Abandoned farmhouses. He took pictures of peeling paint like it was a museum. He's the one who brought up the cemetery. I don't know if I'm allowed to say its name here without people jumping in, but fine. Stull. If you're from eastern Kansas, you know it. If you aren't, you can Google the rumors, but I wouldn't recommend going out there. I'm posting this partly so you won't. It's just a field and some stones, Jay said that night, yawning. Old church ruins, maybe. Wind, coyote bones. Nothing you haven't seen. You just described my dating life, I said. Ellie was leaning her head on the conveyor belt like a cat, pressing her ear to the cold. "Can we not?" she murmured. "I've got a midterm. I don't want nightmares." "Rumor is," Jay went on, ignoring her, "some kids went in there with beer and flashlights. One came back. He didn't talk after. Just rocked. Hummed through his teeth like they were broken. But it's stories on stories. You love stories on stories," I said. "And you love trespassing." "We'll stay on the road," he said. "No climbing fences, just look. People toss beer cans and spooky talk on the internet, and the real place ends up thin as dust." Ellie clicked her teeth twice, that nervous metronome. "If you go, you're not taking my car," she said. Then she paused. "Unless I go too, so you don't do anything dumb." That's how it started. A dare softened into a late-night drive, a thing you do because you live close and boredom is a kind of gravity. The plan was to finish my shift, grab coffee at the 24-hour gas station, swing by Ellie's to change, and head out, simple, sloppy, the way dumb plans begin. It rained earlier that day, the kind of summer rain that leaves everything damp and fragrant but doesn't cool the air. The late shift left me with a box of apples bruised like knees and a roll of quarters for the laundromat. Around 1:30 a.m., I shoved the quarters into Ellie's palm and told her to sleep if she wanted. She shook her head. "If I stay home, I'll listen for you," she said. "And if I listen for you, I won't sleep." So we went. We grabbed gas station coffee that tasted like cardboard and metal. The clerk, an older woman with 2 braids and a KU hoodie, told us not to go west. "You'll hit fog," she warned without looking up from her crossword. "Ground fog. It sits in the low places." She tapped her teeth with her pen. "Trucks disappear in that." We laughed like kids who think warnings are seasoning. We drove Jay's car, a Corolla with a cracked windshield and a dashboard that rattled at 60 miles per hour. The air conditioner whined. Ellie brought her mouthguard in a red case and a granola bar she didn't open. Jay had a flashlight, the heavy kind that could double as a baton. I had a smaller LED that I kept in the glove box. There's something about Kansas at 3 a.m. that makes talk shrink. The world gets huge and empty. The radio fades to static between stations and the sky feels low, like the underside of a staircase. We passed fields with rolled hay bales like dozing animals. We passed a church with a single orange porch light. We passed a house where an upstairs TV flickered blue patterns in a window. Every time we hit a stretch of gravel, the stones popped under the tires like hard candy. The sound made Ellie wince. "Stop that," she said at one point. "What?" I asked. "The noise," she said. "The crunching. It's like..." She pressed her fingers to her jaw. We parked on the shoulder of a county road where the map said the cemetery would be, and for a while I thought we'd blown it because everything looked like every other dark field. Wire fencing, a leaning tree, the suggestion of a small sign. Then the clouds thinned and the moon showed us shapes. Headstones, a low wall, the outline of an old building foundation where people said a church once stood before it burned or fell down or was torn up, depending on who you asked. There was a chain across the entry and a no trespassing sign that I swear wasn't there when we first cut the engine. "We said we wouldn't go in," Ellie reminded us. "We said we'd look from the road." "Right," Jay said, more to himself than to her. He lifted the big flashlight and let the beam skim the stones. Names, dates, a pair of plastic flowers glued into a vase turned gray with dust. The beam found a small pile of pebbles on a particular grave, and he did that little that means his brain is photographing. "People leave stones sometimes," I said. "It's a Jewish thing." Or sometimes it's just people leave stuff. "It's the shapes," Jay murmured. "They're all round, the rest of the gravel. Those are angular." He said it like it mattered. Maybe it did. Maybe I made that up later. We stood there longer than we meant to, like the air had gotten syrup thick. I could hear crickets and a distant truck on the highway, and another sound that kicked in slow, like the sound you don't notice a refrigerator makes until it stops. It was small, continuous, a soft clicking. I thought it was the bugs. Then I thought it was the fence cable vibrating in the wind. I held my breath to hear it. The sound was in my mouth. It wasn't noise out there. It was mine. Not loud, not yet. Tiny taps inside my skull. The kind you get when your molar meets your premolar wrong. I unclenched my jaw. The clicking kept going. Ellie made a small noise and touched her cheek. "Okay," she said, swallowing. "Funny, can we go? You hear it?" I whispered. "Shh," Jay said. He wasn't looking at us. He was looking at the old foundation. Part of the low wall had a slot that could have been a window once, and beyond it was a darker square, like a shadow on a shadow. The ground fog the clerk had warned us about sat there like a breath held in. My flashlight did that thing cheap flashlights do where it flickers when it's still mostly full. And for a second I imagined the beam as something alive, sniffing. The clicking in my head became a little chorus. Not loud, but plural. Ellie's hand searched for mine. "Nothing to see," I said, and because I was the oldest and because she had her fingers dug into the sleeve of my hoodie, I started turning us back toward the car. Jay didn't move. "Wait," he said. "Look at the tree." He swung his beam to the right to a gnarled old thing with a trunk split like laced fingers. People said they hanged witches there. People said a lot. At shoulder height, someone had tied a string of something along a low branch. Little pale shapes, thumb-size, strung in a row. I thought it was seed pods. Jay thought it was weird art. Ellie thought it was a joke. "Students," she said. Ugh, the wind moved, or maybe the fog did. The little shapes knocked together. Tick, 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 tick. It sounded like applause in a cheap theater, light and sarcastic. I made myself laugh. "See," I said. "Creepy but dumb." Jay stepped closer to the chain without touching it. He played the beam along the branch. One of the shapes rotated slowly. It was a tooth. Human? I don't know. It was too white, too smooth, maybe too large. It was also probably a piece of plastic because that's what the rational part of my brain said, and I clung to the rational part like a life preserver. "I'm done," Ellie said, teeth clicking. She fumbled for the red case in her pocket like she wanted to put the guard in right then. "I hate this. I hate this." She was shaking. I put an arm around her and told her we were leaving. Jay tore his gaze from the branch and nodded, like it was a decision he'd been waiting for someone else to make. The chain across the entry was still there, but I swear again that when we turned back, the no trespassing sign was higher, a little crooked, tapping against the chain with the lightest possible clack. Everything clicked. The bugs, the sign, the little string of shapes. My jaw. We made it maybe 15 paces toward the car when we realized there were 3 of us and 4 sets of footsteps. I felt it first through my shoes, not my ears. Crunch, 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 crunch. Gravel underfoot. I stopped. Everyone else stopped. The 4th crunch went on a beat too long, like it belonged to someone who wasn't great at walking. Then it stopped too. We looked at each other without moving our heads like slow owls. "Hello?" Jay called, and the way his voice cracked made the coffee in my stomach turn to mud. We didn't see anybody. The fog had the road by the ankle now. A few feet ahead, the white line on the shoulder softened like chalk in rain. I remember the smell more than anything. Wet weeds, warm metal, the faint sweet tang of Ellie's peppermint gum. "Stay with me," I said to her, quiet enough to ignore whatever pride I had. She nodded and took my hand. The 4th crunch didn't happen again. Instead, there was this other thing, a new layer to the clicking. It wasn't loud, but it wasn't far, like someone clacking their teeth together in the back seat of their mouth. A choir of tiny taps like hail on a tin roof in a dream. I hate writing that. It sounds fake. But that's what it was, a choir. Not singing, counting, practicing. The sound rose, stopped, rose again as if coordinated. Ellie pressed the mouthguard into my palm without looking down, like she wanted me to hold it. The plastic inside the red case rattled faintly against its own walls and I nearly dropped it. We reached the car. Jay aimed the big flashlight at the passenger window, and we saw our own pale faces in the glass. And for a second I had the strangest thought that it wasn't us, that there were 3 other faces looking back, waiting, clicking. I unlocked the doors and got Ellie in the back seat. I got in the front. Jay slid behind the wheel, put the key in, and turned nothing. The engine did that sick little cough, the one that's mostly silence. He tried again. Dead. Of course the battery had been fine. Of course the car had started an hour before. Of course it had. He cursed under his breath, turned the key again, and banged his fist on the dash as if it owed him. The clicking outside or inside, I can't tell, quickened like rain coming in. Ellie had her eyes closed. Her jaw was shaking like a dog dreaming. I handed the red case back to her. She popped it open and stuck the guard in with the neat speed of practice. The clicking muffle didn't stop. It grew more organized. I felt my molars hum, not like a sound, like a tuning fork pressed to bone. "Let's call," I said, but my phone showed 1 bar blinking like an apology. Jay held up his too. He didn't dial. He just stared at the old window slit in the foundation like something was happening there, that I couldn't see. I looked because I couldn't not. The fog at the base of the opening was being disturbed, the way breath moves a curtain, but the air was still inside the car, and the fog had no reason to move. It did anyway, stuttering, as if something invisible started and stopped a dozen times trying to get the timing right. "You said we wouldn't go in," Ellie whispered around the mouthguard, which made her voice nasal and far. "Please don't go in." "I'm not going anywhere," Jay said, but his hand went to the door handle like a reflex. He didn't open it. He just pressed it, and I heard the tiniest click of metal. The headlights worked when he tried them. The beams washed over the low wall and the tree. The little shapes along the branch threw spotless shadows, all identical. That's when we saw the deputy. He was on the far side of the road in the opposite ditch, standing half in the fog. He had a flashlight under his left arm and a ticket pad in his right hand. He had the kind of no-nonsense hat you associate with Halloween costumes. The fog made the brim fuzzy. He tapped the pad with his pen, tap, tap. My first thought was an insane, guilty relief. A cop meant normal. A cop meant engines jump-started and warnings and lectures and you kids go on home. I rolled the window down. The air felt like the inside of a mouth. Warm. Damp. Swedish. "Evening," the deputy said. And it wasn't friendly or unfriendly. "Car trouble?" He stepped closer. I noticed then that he didn't have a car. There was no patrol cruiser. Just him and his shine of brass and the fog at his legs. "Battery," Jay said. "We're leaving." "We weren't." "Don't care what you were," the deputy said, slow as molasses. His eyes were light and pale. I couldn't see if he was older or younger than me. "What matters is what you are going to do. And that is you're going to sit quiet for a moment and stop clacking those teeth." He said it like we were doing it on purpose, which made my chest go tight because at that point I wasn't sure we weren't. Try not to swallow when you think about your tongue. Try not to clack when every bone in your head wants to count. "We're not..." Ellie started and he raised the pen like a conductor. The tap, tap, tap of it on the pad synced with the clicking. Or maybe the clicking synced with him. The sound climbed the way a living thing climbs a fence, careful and certain. "Shh," he said. "It's listening." I wanted to ask what it was. I wanted so much to fold sanity around me like a blanket. "Sir," I said. Polite because that's what you do in the Midwest even when you're staring into something far below politeness. "We just want to go home." "Good," he said. "Then you will. But don't look back and don't count. Numbers are invitations." He moved around the car and opened the hood without asking. Jay watched him, rigid as a gatepost. The deputy didn't lean in. He didn't jiggle any wires. He didn't pull a battery cable or test a fuse. He just stood there and looked at the engine like it was a sleeping animal and said, "Hush." I didn't hear a click from his pen after that. For a moment, the whole world balanced on the head of a pin. Syrupy silence. Then my jaw released. I didn't realize how hard I'd been clenching until it hurt to stop. "Try it now," he said. Jay turned the key. The engine barked and then came alive, relieved like a dog that found its way back to the porch. The headlights brightened. The fog didn't back off exactly, but it loosened. I could see a little farther down the road now. There was still no other car. The deputy closed the hood and bent to look in at us through the open window, his face closer than I wanted anyone's face to be. "Drive," he said, slow, mouth shut. "If you feel it happen again, turn the radio up, not to quiet it, to remind yourself what other sounds are." Jay nodded and put the car in drive. The deputy hit the roof twice with his open palm as if we were a taxi. Thump, thump. He stepped back. We pulled away, gravel ticking under the tires like rain on glass. Ellie kept her eyes on her lap, on the red case. I kept mine forward. Jay drove exactly 35 without looking at the speedometer. After a minute, because I'm weak like that, I glanced in the side mirror. The fog was a wall. The deputy was a shape in it, or maybe it was a tree. When we reached the highway, the clicking returned like an old friend. Soft this time, timid. Ellie turned the radio on. We got a talk show broadcasting from somewhere miles away. A caller telling a host about the best place to get burritos at dawn. And that voice, that ordinary voice, felt like a rope in a well. The clicking receded in the face of it. Not gone. Hiding. We didn't talk about it that night. We dropped Jay at the motel. He didn't go in right away. He stood in the orange pool of light by the ice machine and put a finger to each temple like he had a headache. Ellie and I drove home. We ran the laundromat dryer for noise and pretended that was why. We slept with the bathroom fan on. In the morning, when we finally spoke, it was about groceries and schedules. Our mouths felt bruised. I tried to find the deputy the next day. I called the county non-emergency number. The woman who answered was patient the way secretaries who have dealt with hog escape calls and teenagers are patient. She said there'd been no one on that road overnight. No one on that beat. Maybe you saw a neighbor, she suggested. Farmers sometimes come out if they see cars pulled over. We get reports. Later that week, I stopped at the gas station for coffee again. The same clerk with the braids flipped her crossword and said, "Fog was bad, wasn't it?" And because I wanted it simple, I said, "Yeah." She tapped her pen against her teeth just once. "You're lucky," she said without smiling. "Some people come out of there with a tune they can't stop humming. Gnaws the gums. I've seen it." I almost told her she was being dramatic. "That's not how teeth work," I almost said. But my mouth hurt when I spoke, so I didn't. Jay stopped coming by the grocery store at night. He texted twice, short stuff. "Busy. Later." We hung out exactly once after that at a diner off 6th Street with brewed coffee that tasted like a clean filter and eggs that slid off the plate. He kept biting the inside of his cheek. He told me not to tell Ellie, but he'd been hearing the clicking in the motel when guests chewed ice. He said the ice machine sounded like applause. He laughed like it wasn't a joke. He said a couple checked in from out of state and asked him for directions without moving their lips. He said he watched their teeth move when their faces didn't. "It's the sleep," he said. "I need sleep." I told him to take a day shift. He said he'd try. He didn't. As for Ellie, she started waking up with her mouth guard chewed through in little white curls, like someone had shaved soap. She began humming under her breath while studying, the same few notes over and over, not a melody so much as a scale. It wasn't eerie. It was annoying, like a dripping faucet, but when I asked her to stop, she would blink as if she hadn't realized she was doing it. The gum she liked, peppermint, made my tongue feel itchy. The fan in the bathroom began to sound on bad days like teeth chattering. We got repairs. We replaced the fan. The new one did it too. We saw the deputy once more, or I did, and maybe I'm making this part up. It was mid-afternoon, a Saturday when the town smelled like lawnmowers. I was at the light by the feed store. A man crossed in front of me wearing the kind of hat that softened at the edges, and something about the way he didn't look at cars made my body go alert. He had a coffee in his left hand and a folded newspaper in his right. He touched his pen to the paper like a habit. Tap, tap. He looked up once, not at me, but somewhere above the hood of my car where the reflection of the sky made its own small fake world. And he lifted the pen in a little salute. Then the light changed and the car behind me tapped its horn. And that was it. Ellie moved out the next year, to a place with thicker walls and neighbors who didn't run their dryer at 3 a.m. She left the red case behind by accident. I found it under the sink with a few loose floss picks. The mouthguard had a crescent-shaped crack in it like a bite taken out of the moon. I texted her a picture. She told me to toss it. I couldn't. I put it in the junk drawer under the takeout menus and the 8LA card. Some nights when I couldn't sleep, I'd open the drawer an inch and shut it again. To hear the plastic rattle. It calmed me, which is not normal, and I know it. Jay's photos went quiet online. The last ones were of lakes and peeling paint, dated a week after our drive. I messaged him for months. He replied once, "Got a new job." He didn't say where. When Facebook shows me the birth dates of people I don't see anymore, his pops up with a little balloon and a button that says, "Celebrate." I never do. Sometimes, in places with bad acoustics, I think I hear him humming in the next booth. I turn and there's nobody. Sometimes I think that's what he wanted in the motel. That ready-made applause from the ice machine. A steady little reward for staying in place. People in town still tell stories. Kids loop floss around their fingers and pretend it's string and tie it around their teeth and say choir like a dare. The rumor mutates. My favorite is the one where the clicking is the sound of stones skittering in prairie wind. That one is true. It does sound like that. I try to hug my truth close. That nothing touched us except sound, and that sound is the gentlest kind of harm. That there are places where the air has learned how to count, and it wants you to join in. I haven't been back. I still drive the highway because life goes on. I still pass that exit and keep my eyes on the line where 2 lanes become 1. And sometimes, when the fog lies low and flat across the fields, I turn the radio up because I remember that's what the deputy told us. I don't always make it in time. Occasionally, when the world is too quiet, a rhythm rises behind my ears. Tap, 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 tap. It's small, polite, like a neighbor knocking on a wall to see if you're home. On those nights, I chew a granola bar just to make other noise. I put ice in a glass and force my own applause, loud and clumsy. I sleep with the bathroom fan on. Last month, I moved my sofa to vacuum and found a tiny pile of pale pebbles nested in the dust bunnies. I picked one up between finger and thumb. It was smooth with a sharp edge like a tooth. I told myself it came in on a shoe. I told myself it chipped from a cheap planter. I told myself a lot. Then I heard it. In the quiet after the vacuum, a faint, patient clicking as if something very small and very far away were practicing, counting itself to sleep. I stood there with a pebble in my hand and the radio off and the fan cold and still, and I put the pebble back down and walked to the kitchen and turned on the tap so the water would clatter against the sink. That noise filled the room like a blanket. It helped, it always helps.
Until the water stops, I'm posting this because it feels like stealing a little ground back.
If you go, don't. If you must, don't count. Don't hum along. Don't collect souvenirs. If something taps in your head, turn on a voice. Any voice. Ask someone at a station far away to tell you where to get good burritos at dawn. If a man in a hat tells you to hush, hush. If you have a sister, keep her mouth guard in your pocket like a different kind of charm and walk forward. Slow and steady. And do not look behind you even when you want to more than anything. I'm ending here. Because out my window the night is the kind that makes you hear your own house move. And because the neighbor upstairs has started their laundry early. And every time their machine hits the spin cycle, the building vibrates in this delicate, repetitive way, like porcelain teeth laid edge to edge on a drum. It's probably normal. I'm sure it's normal. The sound's small now, even friendly, a kind of counting. I'm going to turn on the radio and the fan and maybe run the tap. I'm not going to listen for the space between the clicks where a breath might fit. I'm not going to count how many there are before the pause or how long the pause is. I'm not. I never planned to write this down. It's the kind of memory you push into a corner and stack other memories on top of. Like boxes in a garage you know you'll never open. But a few nights ago I woke up with soil in the creases of my palms, wet, dark soil. And I realized this thing has followed me further than the cemetery fence. I don't care if anyone believes me. Maybe typing it out will put it back where it belongs. 2 summers ago, my sister Mara dragged me to a history weekend in Pennsylvania. She's the kind of person who spends her PTO at places with plaques. I was there to keep her company and, I'll admit, for the promise of a decent beer in town afterward. Her friend Leo tagged along too. He's one of those Civil War reenactors with the wool coat even in heat that makes the pavement wobble. He brought a dented canteen and a felt hat and told us more than once that authenticity is a moral obligation. We did the usual loop, visitor center, film narrated by a stern actor, glass cases with buttons and buckles, the gift shop where I bought a postcard I never mailed. We walked the field with the cannons and stood where Pickett's charge broke. The air buzzed with cicadas. Photographers leaned over split-rail fences for the same shot millions have taken. The ground was uneven and dry and smelled like hot grass. Nothing strange yet, unless you count the way the crowds fell quiet without being asked, as if the place pressed a finger to everyone's lips. It was Mara's idea to do the night tour of the National Cemetery. She'd read about it online. Licensed guide, small group, lanterns instead of flashlights to protect the mood. She said, "It's the respectful kind, not the jump scare kind." Leo rolled his eyes and said he preferred primary sources, but when the time came, he fixed his hat and came anyway. The meeting spot was by the low stone wall near the arch, the one with the iron gate. A ranger in a green shirt stood off to the side writing something on a clipboard. The guide, her name was Ruth, was about my age, mid-30s, in jeans and a jacket way too light for the sudden breeze that came with evening. She had one of those calm voices made for answering the same questions every night. We were 10 people total. A couple from Ohio, 2 college kids in school sweatshirts, a quiet older man with a camera that probably cost more than my car, and a mom with a teenage boy who kept checking his phone. Ruth passed out those cheap glow-stick bracelets so she could count us in the dark. "Don't wander," she said, not unkindly. "You'll think you're walking a straight line and you won't be." The cemetery surprised me. I had imagined rows of white stones like in movies. There were rows, yes, but they were low. Small markers rounded at the edges, some with names, many without. The grass was short and the trees were tall. The sky was the color of a bruise. There was a flag at the center and I could hear, faintly, the ring of the halyard clip tapping the pole in the breeze. Outside the fence, a car alarm chirped twice and went silent. Somewhere far off, a dog barked and then kept barking. The lanterns we carried barely dented the dark. They threw cones of warm light that made our own footprints look wrong, like we had just stepped out of a photograph. Ruth gave the usual history. She pointed to the arches and recited President Lincoln's words. Not the famous ones, but a line about hallowing ground. She told us there were mass graves early on, then reburials, then more order. She didn't lean into the ghost stuff. She did the opposite, saying things like, "Sometimes during the summer you'll get heat lightning that looks like a camera flash. That's not paranormal." She mentioned cold spots, explained temperature layers and drainage. You could tell she'd heard every story and had a gentle explanation for each. Still, she had a section she kept for the end. She stopped near a corner where the cemetery rolled downhill, toward a row of older trees with wide black trunks. The lantern held low lit her hands. "People ask about the hands," she said. The kids snickered. The Ohio couple looked at each other. Ruth continued, "Most of what I hear is the feeling of pressure on the ankle, or someone say something like, 'It felt like a child grabbed my hand.' That's grief talking. This place holds grief. It's supposed to. But there are a few reports that don't fit the usual patterns. They use the same words without knowing each other. Cold hands, pulling, mud fingers, and sometimes," she paused like she was checking herself, "people lose things they cannot find. Not because they dropped them in tall grass, because they didn't drop them, because the ground eats them," Leo said with the hint of a laugh. The teen glanced up from his phone. Ruth didn't smile. "We have a maintenance report from 2009 where a visitor's shoe was not retrievable. That's the exact phrasing. It's still in a file in the office." She looked at our shoes. Sandals, sneakers, Leo's boots. "It's probably just water, clay, suction. But I tell you because tonight, if you feel anything around your feet, you lift up slow and step back. And if you feel a strong tug, you call for me. It's rare, but I don't like surprises. This should have been hokey. It wasn't." Maybe it was her voice or the way the air cooled all at once, raising the hairs on my forearms. I slid my hands into my jacket pockets and touched the folds of the postcard I'd bought earlier. It was soft with a damp I couldn't place. I wiped my palm on my jeans. We left the corner and walked together down a slight slope between rows. The lantern light swung. Our shadows lengthened and wobbled across the markers. The group spread out just enough for space, but not enough to feel alone. The camera guy took a photo without the flash. The Ohio couple whispered about their hotel. The teen's screen glowed under his chin. It started with Mara. She made a little noise like the sound you make when you find a spider on your arm. I looked over and her face was scrunched up in confusion, not fear. "Something's cold," she said, then laughed like she didn't really believe herself. "On my wrist." Leo nudged her with his elbow. "It's the power of suggestion," he said. He doesn't have much patience for anyone else's experience, but I saw it. Mara's right hand hung at her side. The lantern light caught on a pale band of skin where she wears a hair tie, and there was a tension in the tendons I know well. It looked like she was holding someone's hand lightly, the way you hold a kid's hand so they don't dart into the street. She tried to lift her arm and there was resistance, like pulling a stick free from a shallow current. "Ruth?" I said, not loud. Ruth came over fast, lantern scraping my eyes with brightness for a second. She didn't touch my sister. She crouched and held the light low near the ground. The grass was close cut. There was no hole. The soil was pressed flat from hundreds of feet and mowers. Ruth said, "Lift straight. Don't twist." Mara raised her arm and I saw nothing, but I felt something. The air around my knees dropped temperature the way it does when you open a freezer. Mara gritted her teeth and the lantern light flickered, or my eyes did. And then her hand came up free, fingers slightly curled like they'd been in someone's palm. She shook her wrist hard twice and laughed again, but it was that brittle laugh with no humor in it. The teen filmed. Leo said, "Okay, that's a trick of nerves. Your arm fell asleep in cold air." The Ohio woman told him to shut it with her eyes. We moved on. The quiet older man with the camera fell behind to frame a shot of the flag through the trees. Ruth glanced back to count bracelets, the green circles bobbing. 9, 10. Okay. I kept my hands in my pockets because the skin on my wrists felt exposed. like I'd rolled up sleeves in a room full of strangers. We passed a section where the markers were so close together it was more like a cluster than rows. A branch tapped somewhere above us with a rhythm that sounded too regular to be.
When tap, 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 I told myself it was a flag.
Clip, tap. I told myself a lot of things. It would be neat to say I felt the first touch on some recognizable date on the stroke of midnight, during a pause in speech, punctuated by the call of an owl. It didn't happen that way. It happened while I was thinking about pizza. The tug was gentle, childlike. I looked down and my mind did that slow split-screen thing it does in car accidents and breakups. On one side, my left hand attached to me, fingers grimy from the railing at the visitor center. On the other, a small, cold, unmistakable pressure around just above my wrist. A thumb not where a thumb should be but opposite, as if the other hand only half remembered how to be a hand. I didn't call out. I froze. My first thought wasn't ghost. It was that someone had gotten too close in the dark. I lifted my hand and the grip went with it, not squeezing hard, just staying. The pressure was precise in a way air isn't. I tried to slide my hand out and felt texture. Wet grit, granules like sugar under skin. The touch was not a touch. It was contact with something made of packed, damp particles. Dirt, not flesh. I said too loudly, "Hey!" Mara ended up on my other side before I could say her name. "You feel it?" I didn't finish because the second grip came on my right ankle. That one wasn't gentle. It was the feeling of stepping into mud that doesn't want to let go. It pulled backward toward the heel, then down. I yanked my foot up on instinct and it made that sucking sound you hear when boots come out of muck, except I was on grass. And there was nothing on my sole when I looked, nothing to explain it. The pull came again, harder. I lost my balance and took a step forward and the pull adjusted. Clever, matching, dragging down. "Ruth," I said loud this time. The camera guy finally looked up. "Don't twist," she said again and put her lantern on the ground. She pointed its light to the spot by my ankle. Everyone edged closer and then stopped, as if a boundary had been reached and announced without words. The beam showed nothing unusual. No hole opening, no sinking. But the grass leaned slightly the wrong way, like a current running through a field. That's the only way I can put it. Leo stepped forward, possibly to help or possibly to say something smug he'd regret. The pull on my ankle jerked hard. I dropped to one knee. He grabbed my elbow. For a second, everything made sense again. Man helping man up in the dark, and then his face changed. The bravado drained out like color. He hissed, "It's got my boot." I saw it then. Not a hand. Not in the way you imagine when you're a kid sticking your arm under the bed to prove to yourself nothing's there. It was an impression that moved under the grass. A press-out shape. Fingers not fingers, but stripes of darker dampness. They wrapped around the toe of Leo's boot in a way impossible for wind. He ripped his foot upward and the thing below pulled opposite. The speed of the tug would have toppled him if the ground weren't there to catch him. He swore and the sound snagged in his throat so it came out thin and wrong. "Step back," Ruth said to all of us. She wasn't calm anymore. She had a quiet kind of panic in her voice, the kind that makes you obey. "Both of you, straight up. Don't twist." To Leo, she added, "Loosen your laces. Now." He bent and his fingers slipped. He tore at the knot with more force than finesse. The tug on my ankle grew steady, patient, like the feeling of a tide moving you while you stand distracted. I reached down to peel whatever it was off my sock and felt my fingertips sink past grass into something cooler than the night. Not mud, not water. Something packed and living in the way a crowd is living. I almost said sorry. Don't ask me why. It felt like a hand that didn't remember whose hand it used to be and was afraid to be alone. "Straight up," Ruth said again, and I heard her pick up the lantern and turn the angle of light in some practiced way so it didn't glare. 1, 2... We pulled and my foot came free with a startling ease that made me stumble, like a door opening when you expect it to be locked. Leo's boot didn't come. The laces were still halfway tied. He shouted, not a dramatic howl, just the naked animal sound you make when you scald your skin. He pulled until his face went red, until I saw the veins in his neck. The boot stayed. If anything, it sank. We watched the leather collar wrinkled by his grip slide an inch lower, then another. He hit the ground on his hands and tried to get fingers under the heel. Dirt got under his nails and he didn't notice. "Leave it," Ruth said. "Step out. Leave it." Something in her tone made me listen. Leo didn't, not right away. He'd never left anything behind on purpose in his life. He tried one more time, and the sound he made then was worse, not because it was loud, it wasn't, but because it broke in the middle like a shorted wire. Mara grabbed his arm and I grabbed his belt and we hauled up. His foot slipped out of the boot and into the night air. He fell back, sock grimed, toes white where the elastic had squeezed. The boot remained, toe down, then heel down, then not there at all. The grass smoothed itself as if a hand had pressed it flat. The group stood in the dark in a ring of held breath. No one said anything clever for once. The boy forgot to film. The camera guy must have taken a photo because later he said he had. But at the time there was just the small scrape of Ruth's lantern setting back down on the ground and the metronome ping of the flag halyard somewhere on the wind in our hearts. "Okay," Ruth said after a long moment, voice threadbare. "We're going to walk back to the gate now, slowly. Stay close. Keep your hands where you can see them. If you feel anything, you speak up." She looked at Leo's one bare foot. "You'll be okay for a minute." To me. "You okay?" I nodded, which wasn't true, but she had asked the right kind of question and it steadied me. We retraced our path. The ground felt the same and also different, the way your own house feels after a break-in. I pulled my socks tight at the ankle and kept flexing my toes as if that would keep them mine. The lantern light wrote its temporary stripes on grass and stone. The low stone wall by the gate looked like salvation, which is ridiculous, a 17-inch barrier between haunted and not. But we all pushed through as if the iron made a promise. The ranger with the clipboard was gone. The parking lot lights hummed in that fluorescent way that's louder after quiet. Leo stood by the car and shook. Not dramatic, just the tremor that comes after adrenaline leaves. He stared at the empty space where his boot would have been and laughed angrily, the way people laugh at funerals when someone says the wrong thing and they need to make noise or choke. He said he'd go back in and get it, and then said no, he was fine, and then said again he'd go back. We didn't let him. Ruth said very clearly, "You can file a report in the morning. I will be there to help you." She held our eyes with a professional steadiness that in that moment felt like grace. The Ohio couple asked if this was a gimmick. Ruth looked tired in the parking lot light and said quietly, "If it is, someone's going to great trouble to make my job miserable." We went to a late-night diner because you can't just go to bed after something like that. The waitress poured coffee and pretended not to notice the way Leo kept rubbing his ankle through his sock. Mara drew her fingers along the condensation on her water glass over and over, like she was doing some private test of friction. I checked my wrists under the table. My left had a faint ring of darker skin where a hand would have sat if a hand had sat there. I told myself it was dirt. I went to the bathroom and scrubbed both forearms with the kind of brown soap that smells like every industrial bathroom from childhood to now. When I came back, the dining room felt too bright. We didn't talk about it the next morning. That's not true. We did, but in practical terms, should we try to recover the boot? Did our hotel have a printer for Leo's report? Could he buy a replacement in town? He tried to be mad at Ruth for telling those stories that put ideas in people's heads, but the target didn't hold. He settled for being mad at the ground. When we went back to the cemetery during the day, he wore old running shoes. I watched him look at the spot where the boot had been and then look away like it burned. The grass looked like any other grass. There was no hole. The maintenance office took his report. The ranger on duty, an older man with a white mustache, nodded like it matched something he'd already cataloged. "Clay's funny," he said, and didn't meet our eyes. Nights moved on. The drive home was long enough to round off the edges. Work resumed. I had calls and deadlines and spreadsheets. The boot became a story with a shape, set up, weird event, exit line. We told it at a barbecue and people made the faces you make when you want to be nice, but think your friends are being dramatic. Time, which fixes so much, fixed this into something almost funny. Then little things changed. Once, brushing my teeth, I spit into the sink and watched the froth catch on a few grains of something dark near the drain. I told myself it was dirt from the plants on the windowsill. Once, making the bed, my hand slipped under the sheet and I felt cool grit not where it should be, a dusting along the mattress edge. I told myself I'd tracked it in from outside. And once, this is the one that made me stop telling the story out loud, my phone vibrated on the nightstand at 3:17 a.m. with a reminder I had not set. Drink water. My reminders don't say that. I reached, still half asleep, and closed my fingers around something colder than glass. I yelped and the phone clattered to the floor and there was nothing there. I turned on the light and the nightstand was just a nightstand and the clock said 3:18. Under my fingernails was a thin black line you get when you repot a plant. I don't keep plants. I called Mara the next morning. She said she had started wearing a watch to cover her wrist because the air feels weird on it. She joked like you do when you're trying to make the air less weird by naming it. Leo didn't answer our group text for a week. When he finally did, he sent a photo of a brand new pair of boots, expensive laces, twin straight lines. He wrote, "Never buying used again," and added a laughing emoji that didn't look like him. That would be enough to say the story was about nerves, about suggestion, about the mind putting pressure on itself. I kept the things to myself and waited to forget them. Then last month I took out the trash late and the bag tore on the bin lid and spilled. I swore and bent to scoop the mess back together before the raccoons came. Down near the bottom was the postcard I'd never mailed from the gift shop. It was damp along one edge like it had sat in a puddle. The photo on the front showed the cemetery in winter, the trees bare, the grass silvered with frost. In the lower left corner, someone had written a date in pencil. Not the date we'd gone, a date 2 months earlier. I rubbed at it and the graphite smeared. It didn't occur to me until later that no one had a pencil that night. The gift shop kids used black rollerballs. I put the postcard on the counter and went to wash my hands. The faucet I turned was warm, but the water was cold. Not tap cold, winter stream cold. When I shut it off, I could still feel movement around my wrist like the echo after a watch band snaps shut. I looked down, and the skin above my left wrist was faintly paler than the rest of my arm. A little line like a belt that had been there for a long time and was removed. There are ordinary explanations for everything up until last Tuesday. That night I woke to the sound of my neighbor taking his trash out, the lid clanging against the can. I rolled over and felt the sheet stick to my calf the way it does on humid nights. I peeled it back and felt it give, not with the softness of fabric, but with the reluctant suck of something that doesn't want to release what it has. The bed was clean. The sheet was clean. But the feel was the exact feel of my foot in that cemetery, steady and patient and sure of itself. I pulled my leg up and the resistance tracked with me for an inch, another inch, then let go so suddenly my knee knocked the headboard. I turned on the light. The room was an ordinary room. The poster from a college concert I can't admit I liked. The dent on the wall where a chair hit it during a move. The faint line of shadow where the blind doesn't quite meet the window frame. At the far end of the sill, a square plant tray sat empty, holding a memory of a fern I killed 4 apartments ago. In the tray was a thin crust of soil. It looked dry. It looked harmless. I realized, stupidly late, that I had put it on the sill when I moved in and never touched it again. When I went to pick it up to throw it out, my fingers pressed into it and the surface wasn't crust at all. It broke like bread. Underneath it was damp. I am not a person who talks to things, but I said out loud, soft, so I wouldn't wake the neighbor through the thin wall, "I didn't mean to pull away." The silence that followed was the thick kind that fills your ears. My throat felt tight. "I'm sorry," I added, and that felt true in a way I don't know how to explain. Nothing answered. Nothing moved. I put the tray down and went to the kitchen and ran the tap and stood with my wrists under the water until the numbness came in. The condensation on the faucet beaded and slid. There was a line of black under my left thumbnail. It came off under the scrub brush and left the nail pink and tender. I don't think the cemetery is haunted the way people want it to be haunted. I think the ground there learned something from holding so much grief at once. I think it learned to try to keep what it's given. I don't think it distinguishes between boot leather and bone and any other warm thing that passes over it. I think maybe it just wants company. Or it wants to remember. Or it fears forgetting more than we do. That's me trying to make it a story I can carry. Ruth emailed me last week. I'd left my address on the report because I had questions I never asked. She wrote, "Just so you know, they found a boot this morning after a rain opened a seam by section H. It's not modern. But if you want to come by, you can look." She didn't promise it was Leo's. She wouldn't. I read the email 3 times. I didn't reply. I don't know what I would say. I don't know what would be worse, to see his boot again or to see something so close it could be his and know it's not. Mara texted a photo yesterday of her wrist with a bracelet she bought, a chunky thing made of wooden beads. She wrote, "Fashion or armor? You decide." I didn't send one back. I started wearing a watch like hers, heavy with a band that clicks shut. I sleep with it on. It leaves a mark on my skin each morning that looks like a handprint if you don't look too hard. And sometimes it is cooler there than the rest of me. Sometimes I wake with my fingers curled around nothing and feel for a second that nothing squeezed back. I keep the plant tray on the sill because throwing it out feels unkind. I've thought about replacing the soil with something sterile from a hardware store, but I haven't. At night, when the radiator ticks and the city hums in its usual sleep, there's a softer sound under it, a hush like someone rubbing their palms together over and over. I tell myself it's the wind. I tell myself a lot of things. If you go to Gettysburg at night, wear shoes you can afford to lose. Walk where they tell you. Don't twist. If you feel something cold around your wrist, lift straight up and step back. Don't yank away like you're offended. Be gentle. If you lose something, file your report and go home. If later, in your own kitchen, you turn on the tap and the water runs winter cold in July, just let it run. Wait. Hold your hands under it and feel how it almost feels like a grip. I don't think it wants to hurt anyone, but I don't know what it wants, and maybe that matters more. 2 nights ago, I woke with the feeling that someone was standing by my bed in the dark. Not close. Just keeping the sort of distance you keep when you're not sure if you're welcome. I rolled slowly and my watch slid up my arm with the small sound metal makes on skin. The feeling didn't go. It didn't come closer. It didn't go away. I lay still and listened to the faint tap of the blind string against the window frame, the traffic far away, the sound of my own breathing. After a while, the room felt warmer, though the air from the open window didn't change. I felt the cool around my wrist neutralize like water rising to bath temperature. I must have fallen asleep again because I woke to light and the click of my neighbor locking his door and, on the nightstand, a small smear of dark on the wood in the shape of a thumbprint. I rubbed at it with my sleeve and it came away, leaving a scent that could have been earth or something only pretending to be. I put the smear on the plant tray. It looked right there like it belonged, or like it was waiting. I went to the sink to wash my hands and the water, warm, normal, ordinary, ran over my wrists and I couldn't tell if the feeling of pressure was coming from the faucet or the memory of something that wanted to hold on. I dried my hands and the faint ring of paler skin was still there, a band that didn't fade all the way. There's a knock sometimes now, not on my door, but from somewhere lower, like on the floor. 3 beats, then quiet. I tell myself it's the pipes because pipes make every house a throat. If this is in my head, it's not leaving, so I'm putting it here. Maybe the ground under those stones is just doing what ground does, pressing down, insisting. Maybe it's us who can't stop tugging. Maybe forgetting is the mercy and remembering is the hunger. I don't have an ending because the ending would be a boot on my porch or a hand from under the mattress or some other thing that would make you nod and say, yes, that's how these stories go. All I have is a watch that feels like borrowed warmth, a plant tray I can't bring myself to empty, and the way I sometimes wake with a word in my mouth I didn't mean to say, stay. It doesn't sound like an order when I say it in the dark. It sounds like a promise I'm not sure I should keep.